Today's date is Thursday, March the 14th, 2024. My name is Crispin Brooks. I'm interviewing Geeta Morris and Monica White on behalf of the USC Shoah Foundation. This group interview is taking place in Los Angeles, California, the United States of America, in the offices of the USC Shoah Foundation. The language of this interview will be English. Please state your names.
I'm Monica White.
I'm Geeta Morris.
And what were your names at birth?
My name was Monica Bayer.
And I was Brigitte Bayer.
And have you ever had any other names?
Like married names? Married names, yes. We both have. We have multiple marriages in our family.
We were practicing.
Okay, so I was Monica Lepora and Monica Goodman.
Okay. And I was Geeta Anderson and Geeta Morris and Geeta Martin.
And is there any special significance to your names? Were you named after anybody or anything like that?
I was not. My name was picked before I was born because nobody knew our mom was having twins. So, yeah, go ahead.
So when it appeared there was another baby there, a big surprise back in those days.
5 minutes later.
5 minutes later, that's right. They didn't have a name for me. And so they talked about it for a few minutes, and our dad decided he would name me after his favorite German movie star, Brigitte Helen.
That's how that happened.
That's how that happened.
And please tell us when you were born.
We were born December 9th, 1939.
And where were you born?
We were born in Shanghai, China.
Do you know the exact location?
We were born in the French hospital, which I believe was near or just outside the ghetto where we lived, of the Hongqiu. So in the Hongqiu area.
And do you know any stories around your birth?
At that time, no. We did find out a little interesting fact later.
Mm-hmm. And that was?
About how many twins were born.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. We think we've read this and heard this, that there were about 300 births in the 10 years that the refugees, the primary, which was 37 to 47, 48, when the largest number were there. There were 300 births and two sets of twins. And we were one of them. And we've actually seen two pictures of the two sets of twins. We must have been born about the same time because we look like the same.
We do,
yeah.
In the picture.
So in one picture that we saw, the doctor who was there was holding both sets in his arms. And the other picture was the doctor is sitting in the middle, and there's two nurses and each is holding one set. And we assume one of them, we didn't recognize ourselves, but we assume it was us, one of them.
And do you know the names of the other?
We don't.
We don't, but the only reason we even have seen these pictures is that we met the daughter of the doctor who delivered the two sets of twins.
Yeah, the refugees used to have reunions all over the world. They went to Israel, they met in Chicago, and in China, and so forth. And we didn't find out about these reunions till they were almost at the end of doing that. And so we went to one reunion in Toronto, and that's where we met the daughter of the doctor.
And what was her name? Do you remember?
I don't know.
And she sent us
She sent us this picture. Yeah.
And you mentioned your father had picked out your name for you. Can you tell us about him? And what was his name, first of all?
His name was Eric. We believe he had was one of 4 or 5 siblings. He was born in a little town north of Berlin named Mecklenburg. And
Yeah, that was a state. The city
it
was
was
something like Neuburg or something.
And
Neuburg.
he moved to Berlin as a young adult, I would say, and lived there until they left Germany.
And what do you know of his family, like how far going back?
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing. Our father would not talk about anything.
Nothing.
We, as we got older and were interested and wanted to know things, we would ask questions, but he simply wouldn't talk about his childhood. We really know nothing. At one time, he was a baker, he told us, and he did bake a little bit.
Yeah, he did.
As
And
years
cooked.
went by, and cooked.
and-
I have a couple of lessons that we learned from him about baking, and that I've never forgotten. But
Yeah,
basically, we know nothing.
They had a Great Dane.
They did.
I remember they had a great. He told us because he used to ride the Dane as a
a
child. I mean, we know some things that happened. He was one of the people that was picked up off the street and thrown into a concentration camp.
But
you
that's
know,
much later.
Later in life. I mean, but I'm saying and we can talk about that a little bit more. But
He also fought in the First
he
World
flew,
War.
and flew one of those double planes
Yeah,
for the German Air Force or Army.
and he was about 17.
Yeah,
He was born in 1900.
yeah.
So we always knew how old
he was. Yeah, that we know. But details about family. It was many, many years later that we even found out the names of our grandparents. We knew nobody's name.
Do you know what they're called on that side?
We'd have to look it up.
We
Okay.
don't.
Yeah, we'd have
Yeah.
to look it up. Yeah,
We have an
No.
endless family history that my son eventually put together. But
Yeah, when we were 70,
70.
for our 70th birthday, he did a 1-year search of our family and was actually able to construct a family tree with names. He gathered information from all over the world, from Poland, from Germany, from China, from here. It was a remarkable, just remarkable. And it was the first time we ever saw the names of relatives, cousins, aunts and uncles, grandparents. We knew nothing.
and because they all died in the Second World War, either in concentration camps, in their homes, on the streets, we don't even know. And so consequently, we never had grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, just the two of us at that time and our
and
parents.
our mom and dad.
And what was your mum's name?
Her name was Estera Major, Polish. She was born in Częstochowa, Poland. And she has an interesting history. Her father was a dissident, an activist. A political dissident, and was eventually asked to leave the country. And he went to Shanghai.
To Berlin.
Oh, I'm sorry, to Berlin. He was never in Shanghai, sorry. He went to Berlin. And later, we don't know how, do you know?
Maybe when our mother was two or three.
2 or 3.
She, the rest of the family and 5 kids
Yeah,
somehow, and we don't know how, followed him.
followed him to Berlin. And so she was basically from a very young age.
And eventually she
in
and
Germany.
her dad met. We have no idea how.
Yeah, so
And a question, I was looking through and I found a a ship list from when you immigrated to the U.S. And along with your father and the two of you, one of the names there was Gerda Bayer. Or Bayer. Who was that?
From you ran into that the ship list from Germany to China.
It would have been to the U.S., I think.
Oh yeah, to the U.S.
Well,
yes, that's our
That
stepmother.
comes along later.
Okay, all right, we're coming to
part of the story.
Okay.
Part of our story.
Yes.
Yes, Gerda.
So that probably explains also Steffi.
Yes.
Steffi.
Okay, all right. Well,
Yeah.
you can tell us
Okay,
that.
exactly.
And well, I was going to ask if, unless it's a family secret, the baking tips are always, your father's baking tips.
Come on.
Okay. When you're stirring batter for a cake, always stir one direction, because if you change directions, you will get air in the batter. It's an excellent, excellent tip, right?
It is.
It is. And the second one is basically how to make good gravy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did make good gravy when we finally had such a thing.
Yeah.
And what's the secret to that? Because I've
Well,
often tried and failed.
if you start your own gravy, okay, you brown the flour in butter, and then make sure it's kind of lumpy and thick, and then you slowly start adding whatever broth it is you're adding, be it chicken
beef or-
broth or beef broth or whatever, and just keep stirring and letting it cook until it's smooth, and whatever seasoning you want to put in. So to this day, we make really good
gravy. But there's a third one, and he used to say, the only seasoning you really need for food is salt. And we grew up that way. We, to this day, really don't eat spicy food or much. We don't like a lot of seasoning. We do like salt.
Thank you for that. No, very good advice. And I wanted to ask, thinking about your parents and what you've come to know about your the other broader family. What do you know about their kind of their Jewish life, and what was kind of transmitted through to you? Would you say?
Regretfully, they were, as far as we know, not practicing Jews, at least in our lifetime. Never in our lifetime that we know of. They had as many of the refugees did, lost everything, all their family and everything, because of what happened. And it was, I hate to say it, but being Jewish never did anything for us. That was, on the other hand, they sent us to synagogue. We took 3 years of Hebrew school, walking in the snow, we might add, literally a mile in the snow to the synagogue where we lived. And they kept us out of school for every Jewish holiday. So, it was like that. So.
However, at about age 11 or 12,
I think
probably
we were 12. Yeah.
They had a talk with us and kind of implied, or maybe even came out and said it. If it's up to you whether you want to continue going to synagogue, whether you want to continue going to shul, and it's just entirely up to you. So what would any 12-year-old do?
You said, yay, no more walking in the snow a mile to go, and we pretty much quit going.
Quit going at all.
But we pretty much stayed home on Jewish holidays.
And during that time, our parents also rented us out to other Jewish families for the big holidays to wash dishes and
help.
Clean up and help them.
We did that pretty much since we were 11.
Yeah.
Did you get a sense that the way they were raised that was a secular, or they'd become secular because of their experiences, or?
Honestly, I wouldn't know how to answer that.
No idea. None.
Because we know no personal or life history from either one of them, except what we know about Emma's Dad.
Dad. That's really the only
Yeah,
thing we know.
that's really the only thing we know. There's one relative I think that's worth mentioning, a cousin of our mother's. His name was Artur Balsam. He came to the United States in 1933, early on, and he was a concert pianist and accompanied any famous violinist you could name. And he's recorded and so on. Many years later, I attempted to contact him. I was in New York, where he lived, and I think Ema knew his address. I don't think she ever had any contact with him. And I actually went to see him. He was on Riverside Drive in one of those old New York apartments where you take an elevator that opens into the apartment, very large apartment. And he lived there with his wife. They were very elderly at this point. I didn't meet the wife. I think she was in the other room. And he was not able to connect who I was, or the family. It was a very awkward and just generally uncomfortable conversation, and never had any contact after that. But we do have one of his recordings, his CDs, somebody had reissued,
And which side of the family is?
our mother's
our mother's-
cousin. I believe I think he was our mother's cousin.
cousin.
Yeah.
Other than that, our dad did have one sibling who initially survived the war because she married an East German soldier.
Yeah.
And for a few years after we
Very,
first
very
came
few
to
years.
America, mail would come from her, but it was a lot of redacted sentences
Yeah.
in the letter. And she would ask for simple things. She would say, "Is it possible for you to send us some coffee?" Right?
That was about it.
That's what we
And
remember.
we didn't really have any direct
No.
contact with her.
What was her
And then
name?
she died. Dora?
Dora.
That's
Mhm.
Dora.
I think it's Dora.
Dora.
Tante Dora.
Yeah.
And her last name would have been
Don't know.
which side of the family?
Our
My
dad.
dad's sister.
One of his sisters.
But she died shortly after that, as far as we know. But there was that person. And that's it.
Yep.
The rest perished.
Do you have a sense, and maybe not necessarily directly from what your parents told you, but from what you were able to sort of pick up and think about, what might have been their outlook politically? Do you know how they sort of thought about the world? Did they mention anything in relation to?
No.
Not a clue. I don't have a clue.
Only
Maybe.
in the context of they begged their family to leave Germany with them.
Yeah.
And none of them.
Nobody would. They just
didn't
said,
believe
it's
it.
going to pass.
Yes,
It's a phase.
Just
It-
temporary.
we'll get through it. And maybe that had something to do with how they felt the government might be acting at that point. I don't know. We don't know, really. I really have no clue. And I couldn't even tell you once they were in the States. Do you know what Daddy's political?
They were Democrats.
Were they Democrats?
Mhm,
Okay.
mhm.
I didn't even know that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of the kind of values that they raised you with? Was that a thing that they?
Children are to be seen and not heard.
Right.
Children are property.
Exactly.
We have a lot of those stories. We had a very difficult
Very difficult.
childhood.
Yeah, actually, until we were 17, and we'll tell you about what changed and so on. Of course, the early years were war, the internment camp where we lived during the Japanese invasion. And
Occupation.
Then occupation, rather, yeah, because they were already there. And the 3 years after the war, before we came to the States, and then the next 10 years in the States.
Yeah,
Or
very, very difficult.
So perhaps just sort of more or less following the chronology, what caused your parents to go to Shanghai?
Okay, well, this is our understanding, okay, that Hitler started to pick Jews off the street and throw them in concentration camps, starting in 1933 when there were already 5 concentration camps. People just disappeared. However, families were allowed to go from camp to camp and try to find their relative. And if they found them, they could get them out under a couple of circumstances.
Yes, they had to show physical proof that they had passage out of
Germany.
They had to promise or sign something they would never return. And it's our feeling, even though we don't know
We don't
this,
know
that
this for sure.
money
Probably some
probably
money crossed.
changed hands.
Change
you know.
hands. So
And-
under the for that you could leave. So that's what happened to our dad. He disappeared one day off the street in late 1937, maybe early 38.
I would say early 30s.
Early 38. We don't know exactly
know.
when, but just going backwards from when they actually left. So in 1938, if people know their history, was the year that no country was accepting Jewish refugees. They were turned away by the boatloads, including the U.S. and
Roosevelt.
UK, everybody. There are movies about that, right? And people were just turned away. But there was an open port, and it was Shanghai. And it had to do with business and treaties, trade treaties with many countries, including U.S. and
Australia,
Canada, and, and they had this agreement that they would leave the port open so anyone could come. Papers, no papers, didn't matter.
visas, nothing.
Anybody was allowed into Shanghai. So there were already many Jewish people in Shanghai. Mostly wealthy business people, the Kaduris, the Sassoons
the hair
are
people,
the names that are
those
and
are the
they
well-known names,
so and most of them were Sephardic, but there were Ashkenazi as well. And many of them were Persian Jews, and many of them were in the import-export business. And when the refugees, now how exactly did people in Germany know this, or people in Europe, because it wasn't just Germans? That we're not sure about.
Yeah.
But they knew they could go to
Go to
Shanghai.
Shanghai.
And that's what happened in our family. Our dad disappeared one day. And they were engaged to be married at the time. 2 families got together and went
from camp to camp, okay, and eventually found him in Buchenwald.
Buchenwald. Yeah.
Yes.
And he was there maybe 8, 9 months,
Yeah,
something like that.
Not quite a year.
Not quite a year. And they got him out, and they had passage to Shanghai. And somehow they knew, and maybe some of, your others, Shanghai refugees know how people knew this, that they could go to Shanghai.
And although we understand it was quite a journey there, we don't know it. We don't know the journey from Germany.
Trains, probably not planes, but some
Ships.
Ships.
Some kind of going around Africa
yeah.
or something like that, we
Yeah.
think,
Again, we never heard about it from them.
And so they landed in Shanghai with thousands
Of others.
of other Jewish refugees.
Do you know when they left Germany?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
They left in November
of
of 1938.
And they arrived
In
on
January
January 27,
1939.
And do you know if they left before or after Kristallnacht?
Before. They left before. Yeah. 1938. Yeah. So they were in Shanghai in January 39, and so they lived there almost a year, and we were born in December of 39.
And where did they get married?
In Germany,
before they left.
Yeah,
Mhm.
before they
That's
left.
right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We don't know the anniversary. Did we ever?
No,
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I don't think it was. No, huh?
We have no
Didn't know.
idea. Somewhere between the time they got him out of
Yeah,
Buchenwald and
was-
before they came to Shanghai, left for
Yeah.
Shanghai. Mhm.
And what do you know what happened after their arrival in Shanghai?
They came to Hongqiu Ghetto,
Hongqiu.
which was called the Hongqiu Ghetto, where the poorest
Chinese.
Chinese,
Pe-
poorest,
po-
lowest
population.
income Chinese population lived.
Yeah.
And
That was the Jews that were already there really tried to help them, and they had quite a community in Shanghai. They had had synagogues, they had cafes, they had a newspaper, they had
shops and
theater, they had
Bakeries,
we've read about these things. And some of that once, and maybe they helped direct people to Hongqiu. I'm not sure, but that's where people went. Well, they all went there,
everybody went.
as far as we can tell. Everyone went to that area,
Except
designated area for stateless people.
Yeah.
I've read that phrase.
And so that kind of makes us feel that it was mostly from Germany, that people that lived there, I mean, at least who we knew.
I've actually read a statistic, I don't know whether it's true, that 80% of the refugees in Hongqiu were from Germany.
Yeah.
But there was a Russian Jewish community, and they were kind of separate from us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we don't know much about that.
Mhm.
But there were other Jews, of course, from
All over.
all over Europe.
Poland.
Do you remember them?
No. We lived in a strictly German environment. We
Yeah,
spoke German. We went to German school. We ate German when we could.
I don't know. We don't
We don't
really
know what we
remember
ate.
what we ate. We've talked about it. We don't really remember food, other than that we didn't have enough. We do remember that. But yeah, we just can't recall exactly what we ate. People ask us that a lot, and I would say, you can be sure it wasn't Chinese food as you know it. You know?
Yeah, really.
But it was always a struggle for all of the refugees.
Yes.
Food was always a struggle.
There were 2 schools that were built by the Kaduris and the Sassoons, and we went to the Kaduri school.
Yeah, we went to the Kaduri school. As long as we can remember, I think we went to school.
And started very young.
Very
there was
young.
nothing really to do. And this was before the Japanese occupation. We were very little.
Well, they were already partially, they were there already.
Yes,
They-
they were
they-
in Shanghai. But
They were in
not-
Shanghai, but Hongqiu had been already
Over time, yeah.
because we have a picture from 1937 from a book that was published in 1937 of some of the buildings that had been bombed, or I don't know if they were bombed or
Destroyed,
shot
but
up,
somehow.
but they were destroyed. And there were about, I think we have four pictures, four buildings that were in ruins in Hongqiu. So there was, I think that might have happened when the Japanese first arrived. Not sure when that was. So they were they hadn't fully taken over Shanghai at that time when the refugees started coming, like when our parents came. Yeah.
Settled into a
One room. We always lived in one room. It had a pot-bellied stove, outdoor plumbing,
plumbing.
um, very, very small, minimal furniture. We remember the room.
And wash
A
tub.
wash tub.
that we used
That's
to get
how
washed in.
we
Yeah.
got that's how we got.
Those are early memories
Those
that we actually have.
Yeah, the white wash tub. The water was outside and a big sink. What we really remember is that we lived inside an archway that off a big street, which was called Broadway. It's a very
Major street.
main, bustling street. People lived on the street, worked on the street, cooked on the street, died on the street. Rickshaws everywhere. These are our childhood memories, right?
Right.
The Yangtze River.
Exactly right. And then there was this archway amongst all the buildings along Broadway. And when you went into that archway, that was Hankyu Ghetto. And the first thing you saw was a road down the middle,
Big,
just straight from the
straight
arch,
road.
a long road. And off of that were alleys, little alleys, with two-story buildings. Many buildings. Very narrow
little
little
alleys.
we would call them. And we have pictures of that kind of thing. And that's where they live. We lived.
Yeah, that's where we lived. And we did visit, eventually go back, and we found our very room, the last room we lived in, and the people
after
who
the
lived
war.
there.
Yeah.
And the first time we went back there, it was just the same.
Exactly the same.
Big sink outside.
Yeah, everything was the same.
With two faucets, one on each end, and you could not drink the water without boiling it. And that was drilled into us ever since we have any memory that you could never drink the water. And the reason, we were given the reason, was that there was something in the water that could infect your eyes. And if you got that infection, you would never be able to leave the country. So I don't know what it is. I've never heard about it again.
That's right.
But
yeah.
that's what we remember that's what we were told. May or may not have been so, but whatever, it scared us enough to never drink the water from the faucet directly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in this life, in this one room, we were a few years old. One day, everyone in the ghetto was running out to the main street through the arch to Broadway and standing on the street. And sure enough, the entire street was filled with Japanese soldiers bearing guns and tanks
Bayonets, and there were tanks,
trucks
and
from
of course,
side to side.
Yeah.
From side to side. And from then, our life changed.
Yeah, but before then, our life changed. We had, oh no, that happened after. Sorry, that was when it's hard to explain this.
Yeah.
They came in to the ghetto. They came into Hankyu and got all of us out of our rooms and wherever people lived, and kind of herded. We were pushed into a smaller area.
About 1.25 miles area, roughly.
Well, Hankyu was I think
Yeah, the ghetto.
the ghetto was about 1.25 miles, roughly, from what we've read. And they pushed us together. So by this time, we're talking 1945 now. 41 when the war started. There were 20,000 of
Jews
us.
there.
So we've read 18,000, we've read 25,000, but roughly 20,000. That's the most that we've seen is 20,000.
Yep.
We're pushed together, and from then on, we lived in one room with 4 other families.
Was it the same room as before or different?
No, a bigger.
Some other area. which
Another
we
area
didn't even
of-
know. Yeah.
So that's amazing you were able to remember
We
the first
absolutely
place
remember
as
it.
different.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. First place was a different room, and we moved back to a one room after the war.
In
A third
little-
place.
in the
Yeah,
same
in the
area,
same
but
area.
a different room.
Yeah, same, but the same kind of room.
Same
little,
kind of room.
Wasn't much.
So
big,
there
a little
we
bit
were.
longer than this room.
We were roughly 5 families in a room.
Yeah, we were 5 families
We were,
in a room.
and if you were fortunate, you had a sheet or a blanket or something to separate you.
So there was some semblance of privacy,
Yes.
but you didn't have a little narrower than what I remember. A little narrower than this, but not much bigger than this.
Oh, no, yeah,
Yeah,
I can't think
the
it's even
space.
this big. And we were fortunate, we had a corner and we had a window.
And we spent a lot of time at that
That
window.
window.
We really
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
Looking out, first of all, over the big sink and the rows of toilets. But
Yeah, we think there must have been some kind of medical
facility. of some sort.
facility, something, because we saw people go by who were obviously hurt in some way or being carried, but we never found out what was
Where they
over
were going.
there.
It was
They were
a
going that
distance-
way.
Distance
And-
from us. But
yeah.
we would sit there for hours and
And just
so
look out.
then the air raid siren started. Okay. And we had a few lessons to learn from that. First of all, the first thing you had to do was to open your windows out.
If you heard, as soon as you heard the siren, you were taught to go and open all the windows that you saw, so that the building wouldn't implode if we were bombed. That was the reason given to us, and
Then we gathered in the hallway, the people from upstairs and in each building, and just waited for the all clear.
we
Just-
huddled together for the all and waited for the all clear.
Sometimes we could hear some bombing, sometimes not.
There wasn't a lot of bombing, as far as we know, but there were a lot of air raid sirens. So
Yes.
there evidently were threats of bombing. We don't this we don't know a lot about.
And then we continued to go to school during that time.
Yeah,
We were
Tell me
allowed-
what you
well-
remember about. Can you picture the school for us?
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, this area where we were pushed into, of course, was called an internment camp. So we just called it camp.
Yeah, I don't know if it was called an internment
was.
camp.
Well, that's
We've
what it
seen,
is.
We've seen it. We've seen it written up as. It wasn't fenced. It wasn't walled. It was just soldiers. There were soldiers who kept you from leaving there or allowed you to leave, because the adults were given permission to leave the area to go to work. And they did not feed us. They did not, somebody had to feed the kids, and there were kids. But there were nothing was keeping us enclosed. So when you call it a camp, you have this image of being enclosed somewhere. We've always called it camp.
I know.
We always called it camp. I don't know why, but we've been corrected. There was no camp. Well, it was an area. We were definitely, let's say, imprisoned or held there by soldiers.
So the adults, as Monica said, would line up to leave. And there were 2 Japanese soldiers. One of them was named
Goya.
whose name you've probably heard a number of times.
Yeah, and he was very Napoleonic.
little
He was
guy.
very short and had a big personality, and he was very depends how he felt when he got out of bed that morning. He was very moody. He would yell at people, and there are stories that are written about him getting up on a table that was right there and yelling at people for no reason, saying, "You're not getting out today." And it was strictly up to these 2 whether you got out or not to work. And many people were not allowed for several days, and there was no food.
There was no food.
They worked. They worked.
They worked in a variety, whatever they could get.
warehouses, the
Washing
docks,
dishes,
cleaning houses,
yeah.
whatever. And we knew that because our dad was out there working,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a picture of him working in a
Water purification plant, which at least was more regular as a job
Yeah.
for a while.
But nothing lasted.
Nothing lasted.
Then he worked for CARE, the care packages during the war.
Mm-hmm.
He worked for them for a short while, which was very exciting for us because he once in a while, not every day, was able to bring home a care package. And
we were introduced to powdered
milk,
We had
which
never
we
had
never
anything
had.
like that, and
chocolate.
chocolate.
which we had
The
never
little
had.
candy bars,
So we remember that very well.
Yes.
But they worked or they didn't, and we do remember wishing for more food.
Yes.
So we do remember
Being hungry.
And then one day,
Wait, let's first talk about school.
okay.
Mhm. So we children were allowed out every day to go to school. The Jewish people place a lot of importance on education, no matter
Education.
what's going on.
No matter what.
So we did go to school every day. There were air raid sirens. We did always walk in groups. It was, we think, 2 blocks away from
Out.
camp,
Yeah.
from getting out of the area. And but there weren't a lot of things. I mean, as the war progressed and, the Allies came in and so on, we did occasionally have to step over a body on our way to school, and we would see things, There would be occasional air raid sirens and bombing in the distance. But one day in our classroom, which was right next to an oil refinery, by the way, the oil refinery was bombed. And we did, flames came, besides the horrible noise, flames came into our classrooms because we were exactly next door. And that was really something. We all ran out. Teachers ran out, right?
Yeah. We've never read anything about that or
But
talked to anybody else. But we remember this.
We remember this
very,
clearly.
very well. And it was
How
the
would you-
older kids who kind of rounded us up, the littler kids. We were little, and we waited then, and the parents eventually came and picked us
for
up.
us.
It's a very vivid memory for
Yes.
us. But
Our dad said that they heard it and they saw the smoke, and all the parents just pushed their way out and started going towards the school to pick up the kids. And we didn't have school for a while.
yeah.
Yeah.
While they got that straightened out.
And in terms of the school, what are your memories of sort of regular life
well,
in the school?
they tried very hard to keep us happy and entertained. We loved school.
Loved school.
We always loved school. Right through my PhD, I loved school and teaching. But one of the things that they did that was very important to us was they had talent shows. So now we're twins. Twins are always cute when they're little, They kind of push you out and say, sing, dance, do something, Just, I think, from being twins and being cute, all twins are cute when they're young. I don't know what happened to you, but anyway. So they taught us songs from different countries and phonetically.
Phonetically.
We sang in Russian and Spanish and English and I don't know what all.
French.
French, dressed us in costume, taught us a song from that country, and we performed it. And we have a picture of us in sailor outfits from the U.S. doing Anchors Aweigh.
Yeah.
So we actually have a picture of that. Yeah. So
and we did it.
Yeah. We did it.
Not knowing what we were singing about.
No. No. So they tried to have us have fun things to do and keep our keep us as happy. And when you're a kid, you just live. You don't really understand what's going on. You're scared. You're hungry. You have those kinds of things. There's not enough of something, but you don't really have, I think, the full impression of how hard life was.
For the adults.
Yeah.
Yes.
How
Well, and we didn't know
all we
anything
knew.
else. That's all we knew.
we didn't know. There were many things we learned when we came to the States that we were flabbergasted that everything was new, and we'll talk a little more about that when we get it. But
one day we were 5, and just before
ended.
a few months before the war ended.
Before that, I'm wondering if you can can you picture the school for us? What did it look like?
The school was a U shape.
Yeah.
Okay, and on this side were the young kids, and then there was like the auditorium and something in the middle, and on this side were the teenagers,
the older kids,
the high school,
and there was a courtyard,
big courtyard in the middle.
That's how we remember.
And there was kind of a gate or something
an
at the front
an entryway.
An entryway.
That's what we remember.
How many rooms do you think there were?
There were
a good number of them.
I think so. There were probably about 8 or 10 classrooms on each side.
On each side, possibly.
I would say.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In picturing it, I would say that's right. I'd say 6 to 8 rooms. Yeah.
And divided by 8. Were there multiple classes of the younger kids and multiple of the older?
Yeah.
or-
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any teachers you remember?
Yeah. One.
And we'll tell you
about that in a minute when we tell you the next thing that happened to us, which was pretty traumatic. One day we came home from school, and our mother was gone. Just gone. And our dad was his usual zipper mouth, wouldn't say anything about where she was, what was happening. I mean, she just wasn't there, and didn't come back. And so, long story short, to this day, we are 84 years old, and we still couldn't tell you exactly what happened. We've done everything we could to find out over the years.
We have literally built up a few stories from what people said or
when they said anything.
Yes.
And
But we don't really know.
We don't really know exactly what happened. We had our fantasies about it over the years. We said, well, we like this story.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about those versions that you had and what.
They're better off being heard a little bit.
Well, as we go along,
Yeah.
because here's there's a whole story that's just about our mother, and I don't know, maybe we should just go there for now.
Well, no, I think we need to talk.
You want to do it chronologically?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'd
We'll
like
get
to
back
think
to
that way.
Okay.
So for 2 years, we lived alone with our dad in
Yeah.
our one room.
Well,
after the war, back into the one room.
And we should say, at the end of the war, when
yes.
it was clear that the war was really over, which I have read that the war was over on August 11th, but it was the 15th by the time Shanghai realized the war was over.
And August.
In August, yeah.
And one day, like when the Japanese occupied, everybody was running out into the courtyard in front of the ghetto where we were living, the area, dancing, singing, jumping up and down,
shouting. It was
shouting,
we
crying.
ran out. Everybody
we
ran.
We were 5.
Yeah, we were 5 years old.
And it was quite a scene. Thousands of people so happy because the war was over.
Yeah.
The war had ended.
And then we all went back to where we lived before. And for us, that was one room. It was a different room, but it was the same little room. But we were we were back, and we lived that way with Daddy for
Yeah.
2 years. And then he met and married another German Jewish refugee, and that was Gerda,
Who had a daughter.
who had a daughter a year younger than we were,
and
Steffi.
that's Steffi.
That's Steffi.
Mhm.
And then our life took a turn that
For the worse, let's say.
for the worse.
She hated
She
us.
could not stand us. She could not stand us.
We think that our dad made some kind of deal with her. Look, we'll get married.
You
take
can
care-
help me
you
with
help
my-
me with my
these
kids. That's all
girls.
we can think of,
Yeah, we don't know. We really don't know. But we, suffice it to say that we were then in an abusive household for the next 10 years. And we're talking physically and emotionally abused for the next 10 years. We were constantly told that she found us in the trash
Where our mother
where
threw
our
us
mother threw us,
when she left.
and
Okay.
and that she rescued us and took care of us.
Of us, even though we were ugly and fat,
Fat and
and
stupid.
stupid. You know, that kind of thing that you hear about. But anyway,
And that happened. It really happened. And we had this dual life. Whenever we were home with her,
Yeah.
we were
miserable.
miserable. As soon as we walked out the door and closed the door, we
Okay.
were
Our happy selves.
we were our happy selves. People loved us. We were
Teachers.
straight A students. We were, there was, we were happy once we left, and this went through until we were 17 and literally left home.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then
So-
in let's talk about how people got out of Shanghai.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we understand. The aid agencies like
The
JDC, the Jewish Distribution Committee,
Eventually. Eventually, Hyatt.
UNRWA was there
Yes.
because they help people with their transport.
Right. Mhm.
Yeah. And United Hyatt came a little bit later. They weren't there right then, I understand from what I've read. But this is what we know. Somebody met with the head of the household of all the refugees and said, "Where do you want to go?" And people were pretty much allowed to go where they wanted to go. Many people went home, wherever they came from, Russia, Germany.
Mhm.
Many people went home.
They went to Australia.
And Canada, South
South
America,
Africa.
United States, of course, and about 20% went to Israel.
Did anyone stay, do you know?
No.
Not initially. Nobody stayed. That's what we've been told. That
We
nobody.
don't know that for
We
sure.
don't know. I've never heard of anybody who stayed, and I've read that nobody stayed. Through 1950, I think we're the last people. 49, 50, pretty much everybody was out. And I'm saying. Not at that time, because I have read that some people have come back to live in Shanghai.
Yeah.
Not in the ghetto, because there is no more ghetto right now. There is no. It's gone.
But our dad decided that we should go to the United States because there would be more opportunity
For us.
everybody.
For us
for
kids.
us. Okay.
Yeah.
And we had another 3 years there.
We had to
after the
wait.
war.
You had to wait. We don't know why, how they
did that. But
what was the process for who left when. Yeah.
What do you remember of those years before you left?
Just every day, Henry in a rickshaw came and picked
Picked
up
us up
for
to go to school.
I remember that for
Yeah.
some reason.
And
At the corner, right before you went out of the
Mhm.
arch, we had to walk down the road. And there he
so
was.
there was school, which of course was happy for us. And then it was at that point, and the first time that we actually played with the Chinese kids,
That lived
other
in-
children. So that was almost a daily thing. And although we never learned to speak Chinese, we did. They sang to all their games. They sang songs to all,
Little songs.
and we remember three of
Three
them.
of them. And to know we will not sing
No,
them.
no, we can't do that. But we actually remember
Yeah.
one time we sang those songs for someone we met as adults from Hong Kong, and they thought it was pretty good.
Pretty good.
You know, it wasn't bad. But another time we sang it for someone from Taiwan who spoke Mandarin, I think. And
She said,
she
"Are
did-
you speaking
are you
Japanese?"
Speaking, are you speaking? Yeah, yeah.
That's what
No,
she said.
that was Chinese, but we don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah, and we don't know. Just like we learned all those songs phonetically, all those other languages, we just picked up and played the games with them, and that was really, what we remember.
What did your
Except-
father do at that time?
He worked.
He worked.
somehow,
He was gone
supported us.
Most days they kept working. They kept figuring out ways to feed their kids. But nothing much changed from our perspective. It's interesting you ask about those 3 years because I don't know that we have a lot more. I'm not sure that things changed a lot.
Well, when they got married,
But when they got married, but we were 7 then.
we were 7.
Once she got into our lives, everything changed at home, including our dad, who just was a nebbish, just couldn't do anything. He did not protect us, and we talked to him about it once when we were older, and he said he just couldn't face life alone, and he knew that we were going to be leaving one day, and he couldn't start over, right?
Couldn't start
Couldn't
over.
start over.
That's the phrase he used again and again through the next 10 years. I just can't start again.
Yeah.
He was a beaten man, I mean, like
They-
all of those, all
They
of the
all
people.
were, and we came to understand this all the way through. We have met others like ourselves who were abused as children. We think a lot of things happened because of the Nazis and because of that war, that people's behaviors changed. They may have not been that way otherwise. Maybe they were, but it didn't just happen to us. But of course, for us, it was tragic.
It happened to us.
It happened to us. It was
Yeah.
very, very difficult. And because honestly, we were older then, so we understood that a lot more than we understood the war.
More years.
We understood what was going on, and it was in many ways more personal, more direct.
But then in 1948,
Before we
Yeah,
get
before we
there,
go there.
Do you remember the marriage in 47?
No,
I think they
I'm-
just told us they got
told us
married.
They got married, and she moved in with
With
her
Steffi.
daughter, and then we were 5 in one room.
And how were relations with her daughter?
Not real great.
There was, excuse me, there was blatant favoritism
Yeah,
from the start. So
so that was
that
obvious.
doesn't make for a good relationship.
And she was different than we were. We were bright kids. We loved learning. We were a little bit talented. We were
We were
kind of a
twins.
general. We were twins. We were close, and that's a hard thing for any other child. the other child that comes into a relationship. And we understand that, as adults, we understand all that. But I don't think she had an easy life.
No, I
She
don't
wasn't
either.
abused, but I think it must have been tough for her. I know that the teachers used to say, "Oh boy, here comes another Bayer," after the year after us, and she wasn't anything like that.
And do you know what had happened to Gerda's first husband?
Oh, he lived through. He survived.
He survived.
That's
we know
all
that.
we know. We
He
know
was-
he survived.
The little bit we know about him is that he was a gambler and had gambled away everything they had. And I'm not sure if they divorced in Shanghai or in
Maybe.
Germany.
Don't know.
We don't know
Yeah. Don't know that. But he turned up, didn't he?
that. Yeah.
In
In
Steffi's
Steffi's
life.
adult life.
Adult life.
Mhm.
But we don't know any details at all. How do we know that? You knew that? You were still there in Minneapolis.
In Minneapolis, yeah. I somehow knew it.
Yeah,
Maybe Daddy told me.
maybe. Yeah, I didn't know until you told me. And then we had our turn, and maybe this would be a good time for a break.
Before we took a break, we'd kind of reached the point where you were about to leave China, but I wanted to go back and ask a couple of questions before we get to that. And the first is, can you talk about your treatment during the time of the ghetto by the Japanese?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting that while the Japanese interned us, there was no cruelty as we've heard there were in other parts of the world, and this is what we found out over the years, is that the Japanese always respected Jewish people. They had a great deal of respect. They thought Jewish people knew how to make money and were very good business people, and they respected that. And as far as we know, there was none of that kind of treatment. Now, they didn't feed us, they didn't care for us, so to speak, and they interned us, but again, they didn't build a wall around us and so forth. An interesting part of that history is that when the war first started, a delegation from Germany came to speak to the Japanese and more or less said, not in these straight words, but more or less said, we can solve this problem for you very quickly. We'll build a concentration camp. You can get rid of them all 20,000 at once. However they said that. And the Japanese refused, absolutely refused. And they were supported by the Chinese government, U.S., U.K., and all everybody there supported the Japanese decision not to exterminate the Jews, but to intern us instead.
Do you remember any specific, from your own memory, do you remember interacting with Japanese soldiers or anyone at all?
No. I have no memory of that at all. Not sure we ever did. We saw them.
Yeah, we
soldiers
certainly saw them.
Here and there. But,
And as we went in and out of the area to go to school, on the streets, but never.
So you had to be allowed out. The school was outside?
Yes.
Yeah, just outside.
Roughly 2 blocks away.
Did you go on your own or with other kids?
Yes, we
or-
walked in
We walked
groups.
as a group. Yeah. We usually walked as a group.
Otherwise, we never went out alone, but I guess it was after the war that we went out. I can remember one scene, I still remember it being at the big marketplace. That had to be after the war.
Yeah, that had to be for us to be there. One other thing I'd like to say about school, since we just brought it up, is that we had a schoolmate. Her name was Sonia Muehlberger. She turned out to be a very important and famous person in the Holocaust community. Sonia was exactly our age. We were the same age. We were friends in school. We found each other on the internet, by the way, eventually, and have been in touch with her. Her family went back to Berlin,
Where she still lives.
where she still lives, and she she became a teacher and educator, but she is responsible for locating and identifying thousands and thousands of the Jewish refugees from Shanghai. This was just her life's work. And she's very well known internationally for that work. And there's now a museum in Shanghai, the Shanghai Jewish Museum, which is a wonderful museum. My husband and I were there.
Used to be the synagogue.
It used to be the synagogue in the ghetto, and they've redone it. And there's a wall, kind of like our Vietnam wall, with the names of about, so far, 14 or 15,000 of the refugees. And
Jeez.
Sonia is responsible for most of those.
Most of that, yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
So-
we have a picture of Sonia with us. We were probably 6 or 7
Maybe.
or so. She's in the middle. We're on each side, and her brother Peter's on the ground in front of us. And 69 years later, we got together and we replicated that picture. But we had to help Peter up.
Yeah.
This time we had a
We had
wonderful,
a wonderful
day together.
day. Oh my gosh, just one whole day. We were on a cruise, and we had one day in Germany, and it stopped
Regensburg, something
some
like
name like that, port, about an hour from Berlin, I think, or more.
More, yeah.
Berlin doesn't have a port per se, but anyway, everybody went to Berlin, and Sonia and Peter came to Regensburg, and we had the day there. Now, this was of great interest to a Chinese television studio.
Yeah.
This reunion, and they sent a crew to Regensburg, and they followed us around all day long with cameras, and they
When we had
interviewed,
lunch,
lunch
when we were
together,
just wandering around.
listened to our conversations, and pieces of that day appear in some videos on Shanghai. Just suddenly, when we first saw each other, we ran to each other.
Yeah.
To that scene shows up in the beginning of some video on Shanghai Jews, and our conversation about the games we played, the songs we sang. That piece shows up, unfortunately.
Why?
Well, because I don't know.
I think they tried to do it or something.
Yeah, I think they had. We were throwing them kind of one of the games that we used to play, but we didn't have the equipment.
Yeah. Anyway, it was really fun.
Yeah,
It was a
but
fantastic
Sonia
day.
is a real hero.
Yeah,
she
she
really is. Has done extraordinary work in the Holocaust community. Yeah.
Speaking of the games, what were the games you played?
Well, they had a form of a jump rope made from rubber bands. You make your own. And we actually learned that, to jump that rope. And then two kids stand, one on each side, and you go higher and higher, and you reach back with your legs and you never
this
really
way and that way.
and you never let go of that rope. And it's not easy, but we got pretty good at it. And when we came to the States and showed that, eventually we saw kids all over the city doing this.
that.
Yeah, it was new here at the time.
Yeah.
Nobody had ever seen that.
What was it called?
Chinese jump rope. That's what they called it. That's what people called it. But that was the common. We didn't have rope.
Yeah, we didn't have anything. And there were 2 ways of making the rope, single or double.
Yeah. You can still do that. We can put a rope together.
Yes, we can.
I won't ask you to demonstrate
No,
right now.
No, thank you.
We can't do
Can't
it.
quite jump like we used to.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the Yangtze River and your
Yes.
memories.
Our biggest memory about that was when we were small, little, and the flood would be this high. You know, our dad would take and put us one on each shoulder and walk through the water so that we wouldn't get wet, so that we could go to wherever we were going. And it's so vivid, right? It's
Right.
just so
And it happened every year.
every
it
year.
seemed.
Mhm.
You know,
Of
that,
course, we
that
got too big
we
after
remember,
a while, but
you
we
know,
remember that.
to our knees, the water came up very high.
Yeah.
Yeah, just an amazing and very vivid memory of
And
the
it's a-
water everywhere.
It's a good memory.
Yeah,
It was a
yeah.
good memory.
We remember, feeling safe on our
Yeah.
dad's shoulders.
I was going to ask, obviously there was a lot of times of sort of fear and insecurity during the war. Was there, you just mentioned a time where you did feel safe or protected. Did that happen at other times as well, or was it really after the war? Or when would you say the first time was that you kind of had a feeling of safety?
Feeling of safety. I don't know. When we got
Okay.
off on our own. when we became
17.
responsible for ourselves. Honestly,
Yeah.
we were very insecure. We were very
We did everything we did out of fear.
out of fear.
We excelled out of fear.
We were straight A students because we had consequences if we came home with a B,
That's right.
which we did once in
In
gym. And we walked around the block, remember?
Yep.
We walked around the
About
block.
45
45 minutes we were afraid to go home because we had a B on our report card in gym.
Is that already in the US?
Yeah,
In the
yeah,
US,
In the U.S.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget
Yeah.
what that was, junior high or high school,
Yeah.
somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we were never really safe. And we were like many abused kids. If an adult approached us,
It took
had
a long
that.
time before
And it was a
we stopped.
teacher who pointed it out to us. Our teachers over the years
Yeah.
were our lifesavers. They didn't do anything about our situation, but we had a number of teachers over the years. We started in second grade. They put us back in second grade because we didn't speak English very well. So the
We
first
should have been in third
we should have been in
when
third.
we arrived here.
But then they skipped us in the eighth
Eighth
grade.
grade,
We skipped eighth grade, which we weren't very happy about because we were just comfortable with the language, comfortable with friends at school. We were not allowed to have friends at home, but at school we had friends. And, we were becoming Americans, and all of that. But they skipped us, and
It was it was
The
difficult
ninth grade
going from
was-
seventh to ninth grade.
Yeah.
Yeah. The difference in age and how kids were. Yeah.
yeah, and,
But we
and the
were.
subject matter. We didn't do very well in school in ninth grade. It was the only year
Only
we
year
had.
was hard for us. Yeah.
But anyway, we had to be straight A students, and we worked since we were 11. We
Some kind of job.
some kind of job and turned all our money in.
And it wasn't babysitting.
No,
I worked in a grocery store. We worked in restaurants.
we did.
it
Yeah,
was-
we ran that deli
And
when we were 15. We were so conscientious and responsible that the two brothers who owned this deli said, "Oh, you're here. We can go fishing." We cooked. We waited on tables. We cashiered. We
money.
cleaned up.
Cleaned up.
We lived after school and weekends.
Yeah.
We were 15.
But yeah, when we were 17, both of us left By the time we graduated, I had gotten myself an apartment. I had a car. And the night of graduation, I packed everything I owned into 2 pillowcases. And with them hovering over me, especially our stepmother saying, "We're responsible for you till you're 18, you can't leave." I never said a word. I had called a taxi, and I was off to my apartment. And the next morning when I woke up, I walked around the apartment. I had a great big living room and upstairs duplex. And I put on a Jimi Hendrix record, and I danced all around that living room for I don't know how long. And I was so happy. You know, I felt tangible happiness. I'm free. I'm free. We never looked back. You had already moved out.
I had already moved out.
With
Yeah.
your boyfriend's aunt, or was
Right.
it? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
That felt good.
And that was in Minneapolis.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's when we
There was a
began our
life.
life. We think of it as the beginning of our life.
Sorry to do this slightly jumping back and forward, out of order. I wanted to ask, can you tell me what happened to your biological mother, your mother?
We can.
Yeah.
Or what
Yeah.
you think happened?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, here's
Let's start.
yeah. Let's start with her. First of all, we call her Ima, which is Hebrew for mother,
Yeah.
which you probably know. And that was a deliberate choice because when we were in our middle 20s, we decided to look for her. We knew nothing about her except her maiden name, which was on our birth certificate, that she had married our dad in 1938, that she was in China when the
Yeah,
war started. You know, that's all.
Born in Poland.
Born in
We knew
Poland.
the year.
And that was all we knew. And
Went to the Council of Jewish Women.
went to the Council of Jewish
Los
Women
Angeles.
on the advice of someone I had met who said, well, they might be able to help you.
And this was in the mid-'60s.
Yeah,
Okay.
middle 60s. So
When
we were
that was happening everywhere.
24, 25.
25 or so, yeah.
25, yeah. So we went to our dad and we said, we want to look for our mother. What do you know? And he said, you'll be sorry. That's all he said.
That's all he said.
That's all he said. That was it. And to his dying day, he never said another thing.
Not another
Yeah.
thing about it.
In any case, we went ahead, and we went to the Council of Jewish Women, and there was a little tiny office, smaller than half the size of this room, with one person in it, and at the risk of stereotyping, she was indeed an elderly, typical Jewish New York person with the, New York accent and the whole thing. And she was just lovely. She said, well, let's see what we can do. And she pulled out this thick form. On her desk was a sign that said, Services to the Foreign Born. That was the office. And so she took our 4 or 5 pieces of information, and that was it. And almost 5 years later, 5 years, never heard another thing. Just 4.5, 5 years later, I get a call. Hello? Doesn't say hello, this is Mrs. So-and-so from the council or whatever, but I knew it was her. She said, don't get excited. I just knew it was her. Don't get excited, but we think we found your mother. That was the call.
So just to back up on that a little bit, our understanding was that they took the information they had and put it out around Europe, mostly Germany.
Major cities. Major cities. There's a pattern. There's a pattern.
Twin daughters in America looking for mother. with this kind of information.
And would the name have been Esther Bayer? Bayer?
Yeah.
Bayer.
Mhm.
Bayer was the mayor.
Bayer in German.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. And eventually somebody answered that ad that many years later and contacted them and said, I believe I know this woman, and she's not in Europe, she's in Israel.
And that person was in Switzerland.
That person was in Switzerland, that's right.
I know who that is.
Mhm.
She's in Israel.
Yeah.
And so then they went to Israel.
Yeah. And it took almost a year to find her there, but they found her in Sfat,
Northern.
up in the mountains above Haifa.
Yeah, it's a
little tourist town, artsy.
artsy craftsy
craftsy
town
town.
up in
Mhm.
the mountains.
And that's where they found her.
They
And-
could actually see Lebanon from there.
Yeah. And that same afternoon.
Yeah, because, well, the woman from the council said to me, now, here's what I want you to do. I want the two of you to write her. We have this address. Write her and say something that ask her a question that only she would know, because there are people who try to come to America who don't really, that they say they're related to you, but they're not. So do that and then start corresponding. But that same afternoon, we got a letter from our mother with a picture. And we didn't have to verify anything.
Yeah.
We knew that was her.
Yeah.
Not because we knew her from memory so much, but you could tell.
In fact,
she looked like her.
Yeah, we remember her with long dark hair.
hair.
And here she was a blonde with short hair, but the punam, right?
Yeah,
the face.
No question.
No question.
It was her. It was definitely her.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, reminds me of something you asked earlier about our teachers in Shanghai. We had a kindergarten teacher
Oh, yes.
that we just loved
her. Yeah.
and wished our dad would marry her, but it never happened.
Yeah, after.
Sadly.
That's true.
He picked somebody else. Anyway, so about a year later.
Yeah, it was about a year later. We decided together we'd bring her to the States from Israel. And we decided to bring her to Minneapolis, where I was still living.
I had moved to California in the meantime.
We have this whole story about coming here and where we lived and so on. But anyway,
We'll get back
we'll
to
get
that.
back to that, yeah. And because that's where I lived with my children and all that. And Monica came to Minneapolis. And we went to the airport. In those days, they let you down to the gate, right? And waited for her to come. And eventually we saw this little person with a stewardess, as we called them in those days, on each side of her.
Stewardess, right.
Right, the stewardess, yeah, holding her up. And they walked up the gangplank, I call it, and she was in tears.
Because they landed early.
Because they landed early, and she just knew we wouldn't be there. And, of course, we were there. Okay, so it was quite traumatic. Just to see her, she looked like a person who had suffered tremendously. She was obviously...
Yeah, in a state. And that's the way she was. She was, unfortunately, as we learned later, in early onset Alzheimer. She was totally traumatized, anxious, guilt-ridden.
She suffered from extreme PTSD. She told terrible stories about information she had received about her family and what happened to them during the war. They took my nephew and they threw him in the air for target practice. The horrible stories like that just ate her up. She couldn't get away from it.
And she talked a lot. And this, I think, is common in the refugee community. Either they're like our dad with a zipper across his mouth and would never say anything about anything, or they never stop talking about what happened. And she was of that school with the added, issues that she was dealing with in terms of health and mental health.
And extreme guilt
Extreme.
about
Us. And here's the interesting part of this, which kind of supports what we're saying. What we said about the whole refugee population. When she was contacted by whoever they were working with to let her know that her daughters were looking for her, they had sent her a letter. She took the letter and ran down the hall in her apartment in Sfat in Israel to her then 20-year-old daughter, who she and her second husband, because she also got married to another German Jewish refugee, and they had a daughter 7 years younger than we are. In Shanghai.
Still.
Named Dorothy, our half-sister, same mother, different father. And they left in 49,
a year after we did.
A year, yeah. And so Dorothy was maybe 2 years old.
But
running down the hall, my girls are looking for me. And Dorothy said, what girls? Never knew a thing about us. Never heard about us. So there's the whole thing about people not talking about what happened. And it's not just the immediate family, because we, as we grew up, met other refugees, even someone who was one of the four families we lived with in an internment camp. We met a woman who was there. She was 10 years old.
We were 5.
When our mother left.
Sorry.
And we do this.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Anyway, so we met people. We said, oh, you knew them in China. What happened?
You were there.
This is what they say. Person after person after person. Better you shouldn't know.
That's what we got every time.
We got it every time. It's like, which only deepened the mystery.
Right, yeah.
Better we shouldn't know what happened.
But this 10-year-old girl told us, all she told us was, well, it was the scandal of the camp.
That's what she told us.
Now we really wanted to know, right?
So she said it became, they talked about it in the family. She was 10 years old, so she was old enough to hear this, And she said, yeah, it seems like your father became a drunk and became violent. That's what this woman said. And we said, how is that possible? We were there with him every day.
Yeah, no,
we never saw
happen.
that.
That didn't happen.
We don't know that. I mean, that was the story. And that's why she left. We don't even know what to make of that, that kind of.
And we never felt abandoned by her. We just said to each other something
terrible happened, and that's why she left. But we never felt like she didn't want us, she didn't like us, she ran off because of us. We never felt that, never. And to this day, even though we don't really know what happened, of course we asked her, what happened?
Yeah.
How come? Well, we heard any number of stories. She was very confused. She was just very confused. It was, I don't know.
The time. Here's what we thought for many years. She met her second husband, the man she eventually married, a wonderful and
really
handsome man when he was young. We think they met at the camp. Okay, he spent 4.5 years in Dachau.
Yeah.
When we met him, we would have given anything to have had him in our
Him
lives.
as a father.
Him, yes. He was just wonderful. Anyway, we think
We
that
think
they
maybe they
met
fell in love and-
you know, and these things happen
Yeah.
even when there isn't war, right?
Right.
And
then very recently, we found out that although the Chinese did not give us citizenship, we were bound by Chinese law. And the law was if a woman wants to leave her husband and she has children, she has to leave the children.
and we kind of
It seemed the most plausible thing we
to
ever
us.
heard of why we were left with our dad. Now, it still doesn't explain why she left,
yeah.
but we prefer the story that she and
Horst
fell in love and
And in fact, they married in 1947 as well as our dad.
yeah,
and
same year.
stepmother, Same
What was
year.
his last name?
Vermuth,
Vermuth.
Wermuth,
He was Horst.
Horst. Mm-hmm.
Vermut.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
she was at that time she went by the name of Ilse, Ilse,
Which of course
Vermuth,
is German.
German, Ilse. And I don't know, she said most of her life she was Ilse,
Yeah, she was.
which we, of course, didn't know. But-
Did
Well, probably when she lived in Germany it began.
Yeah.
Most
So
likely.
we had her in our life for 20 years before she died. And one of the things that happened was that Horst worked for a hotel chain in Israel. And when the 1972 Olympics happened in Munich, his hotel, they had a hotel in Munich, and they sent Horst to Munich because he spoke German and many other
languages.
as did Ima,
Ima also
our mother.
spoke.
We have to get back to why we call her that.
Yeah.
So they sent him to
Munich.
Munich to work in the hotel for the Olympics to help out. And he's from Munich. His family came from Munich. They owned some kind of a garment
fabric factory.
factory, and that was home. And he said when his feet touched the ground in Munich, he was home. And he
Called Ima. He said, I don't know about you, but I'm never coming back to Israel. You can come, you can stay, whatever you want to do, but I'm staying here.
Yeah.
And eventually she did join him there.
And it was hard for her because now she was leaving Dorothy in Israel.
Now was married and
she'd
had a
gotten
child,
married.
a little boy, Asi.
And, this brought up a lot of things for her. She'd left us, now she was leaving Dorothy. She used to talk about her girls were all over the world and she did move to Munich. But one of the first things we talked about with her, I think we talked about it the first night she was there, is what to call her. Because we were 29 by this time when we met. We corresponded in the meantime. We were 29. We didn't feel comfortable calling her mother, mama, mom. We just couldn't come up with it. And that's what we came up with together. Ima, the Hebrew word for mother. And of course, she spoke Hebrew and French and Italian. She spoke 7 languages.
Any country she was in, she could speak that language right away.
But anyway, and all our friends called her Ima,
Ima,
thinking that was her name. And we always called her.
All
think
my
of her.
kids, my grandkids, they all called her Ima.
Ima,
Which was
So
comfortable for everybody.
It was very comfortable. So she, over the years, got increasingly worse with her Alzheimer's. But we had some good times with her.
Sure did.
When she was engaged,
Yeah.
you were talking with her. She was so cute, little, and just
This
really
wonderful accent
and
with
she
from
had
all the
the-
languages,
And
just
she had
like-
this great big green
Greenish
eyes,
yeah, just,
big green eyes,
yeah.
and she was really, really cute, and everybody loved her. But if she was left alone, she would she would
She would pace back and
pace,
forth. She would wring her
chain
hands,
smoke, wring her hands,
speak to herself in 7 languages, you
all
know.
mixed up all her languages, and clearly suffering.
Yeah.
But the minute you talk engage her,
Yeah, she was great. And one of the first things we noticed was when she laughed,
Yeah,
she was so unused to laughing that she would become a bit hysterical.
yeah,
And she just didn't know how to laugh, and she didn't believe that she deserved to enjoy herself or laugh. But meeting the family, and my oldest son had just gotten engaged, and I mean, you know, all kinds of fun things. And she was such a star in the family, you know. She'd be sitting in the chair, and everyone would come and talk to her.
And then she came to my doctoral graduation when I got my my doctorate, and as a gift, she took me back to Germany with her. So we traveled together to Germany. Well, she was difficult to be around. She needed a lot of attention, and she would come for 6 weeks at a time. And she came. We traveled back and forth. We'd go to
Germany.
We only went together once.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we took turns actually.
In 1984, we were 44 years old, right?
Yeah.
Was the first time we met Dorothy,
our half sister.
She came to Germany as well, and we met, and we just love her.
Yeah.
We still are in touch with her.
In fact, we were there last
2 years ago.
2 years ago now.
22. We keep in touch all the time.
And so we have a family in Ramat Gan, outside of Tel Aviv. Dorothy, and at that time, her husband was still alive. He's gone now. And her son and his kids, and
3 kids.
You know, so we have.
What was Dorothy's married name?
Engelko. Engelko.
And of course, her name is Dorit.
Yeah, D-O-R-I-T, and her husband's name was Micha.
Micha. No, that's Emma's husband. No,
that's not.
That's Dorothy's husband. I know. She reminds us so much of Emma that we have to be careful not to call her Emma. She looks like her. She has the same kind of body, mannerism.
Emma used to
shrug a lot.
Yeah,
and Dorothy does that.
And we imagine Dorothy had a pretty difficult childhood with Emma.
We're not sure that we were the only ones worse off because of that.
We don't know, but she
know.
Had a wonderful dad who adored her. She adored him.
And we adored him.
We did.
He's just a great guy. So anyway, that's the story of Emma. She died 1992.
Horse died in 89.
Yeah.
Of a stroke. He was driving. Yeah.
And she died with her Alzheimer's.
And we went to Germany for the burials and so on. So
tough. But I agree with you that we don't know what kind of a life we would have had if she had remained, but she would have had such a different life.
Of course, yeah.
You know, she would have had a different life.
Here's a very interesting thing. She always knew, all those years, what was going on with us.
She knew all about us. When we met her, she knew when we graduated, when she started having babies, when we got married, because the community of refugees, and our dad barred all communication, and he must have talked to God knows how many people. Do not tell them anything.
Yeah, because nobody would talk.
So all this time, she was trying to connect with us, and he stopped it.
Yeah.
Did she ever sort of convey to you that she was sorry about the way
Oh.
things had worked out?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
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 It was a deep regret and sorrow for her not to have us in her life. And, and it was difficult. I mean, did we love her? We didn't. We were 5 years old when she left and almost 30. The next time we saw her, she was,
a mess.
and she was very, she was
Besides.
not in good shape, and she was hard to be around, and she talked about moving to the States, and
But then she said, but if she did that, that horse would be looking for her in every corner.
yeah.
She said that in German.
Yeah. So that's the story of her mother.
So jumping right back again to, 45 to 48 when you were still in Shanghai, I just had a question. Did you know you were coming to the US, and if so, did you learn English before you came? Any preparation?
I don't know. We were told that there was some English being taught in our school, but we have no recollection of learning.
But I do remember this English little statement. In America, the streets are paved with gold, and no one is hungry, and no one is cold.
Yeah.
We
Somebody told
somehow
us,
learned that.
Somebody told us that. So I guess we must have been told we were coming to the States because it meant nothing to us. I mean,
States,
we didn't know
what is
what's that,
Yeah.
So, but we were excited, I think.
We were excited about because we were going to go on a ship.
We were going to go on a ship, and we went on a ship. And that ship, I forget the name, but it's easy to look up.
Yeah.
It's somebody's name, I think.
I found it actually. The General M.C. Meigs or Meigs?
Yeah,
M-E-I-G-S.
that sounds familiar. So it was a freight ship, I think. Because there were bananas, soldiers, and refugees.
Thousands of refugees.
Yeah.
Now we were.
This is what we remember
This is
about
what
the
we
ship.
remember. We were below deck. Okay, not that we knew we were below deck, and there were rows and rows and rows of bunk beds, 3 high, and we all slept as many as we
Sideways.
could get across the beds, and that's how it was for 3 weeks.
3 horrible weeks.
Horrible,
Storms. We crossed the Pacific.
We made
Horrible
some stops,
storms.
yeah.
We made some. Yeah, I know. All I can remember. I think we stopped in Manila.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Manila.
that's all I-
Mhm,
that's all I
we
remember.
And everything was white. That's what
Most
I
of the
remember.
adults were ill most of the time.
Seasick, yeah. The
Yeah.
kids were okay, and we tried to play and run around. And then one day,
We had an adventure.
we did. Monica and I decided to venture where we were not supposed to go, up. Okay, so we went up the stairs, a couple decks, and opened a door and wandered down the hall. It was empty. The hall was empty, and everywhere we walked, the doors were closed, but then we saw a door that was open a little bit. So, of course, we peeked around the corner, right? And we saw a whole room full, a big room, full of soldiers, right? Rows and rows of chairs of soldiers. And they were all drinking and smoking and laughing, and all looking forward in the same direction. So we decided we better see what they're looking at. And we, peeked around a little farther. And there on the wall across the room, there were people dancing and singing and cheering on the wall, right? We didn't know what we were seeing.
We had no
What
idea.
would we know,
Of course, it was a movie, but we didn't know about movies. We'd
Or-
never
or
heard
anything
about
like that.
movies. We'd
Yeah.
never seen a movie. We didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
It was
That was
like
quite
it
an
was just
adventure.
a miracle.
Yeah.
How can this be?
Yeah.
It was just a new thing. And this is what happened to us from then on. Everything was new and different. We landed in San Francisco. They put us in a hotel
First
with
of
a
all.
bathroom inside
beds
Right.
in the room and a
Beds.
bathroom, you know.
I think we had a room and they had a room,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the three of us shared a room, the three of us girls. And escalators and elevators and
Drinking fountain. and
drinking fountain. People were drinking, and
out
we'd
of
go,
it.
no,
You know, you have
don't
to
drink
boil
the water.
first,
you know.
right?
Stores. I mean,
Things.
these
oh
were
my gosh.
new concepts. I don't know if people can't imagine.
I mean, there was carpet, something on the floor.
Yeah. I mean, things that people couldn't imagine were not part of your life.
And the food.
On the food,
Oh my
food,
gosh.
real food. I mean,
And milk that came out
milk,
of a
liquid
bottle.
milk.
It was all
That
white.
was so good. To this day, we
Yeah,
love
love
dairy
milk.
products.
All we
The
want is
creamier, the better.
bring on the whipped cream.
Yeah. So we were in San Francisco for 3 weeks.
Being spoiled rotten.
Yeah. And then I've got to tell you, the generosity of the American people at that time was unbelievable. The way that the refugees, at least this was our experience, the way that refugees were welcomed into this country and what this country did for refugees. Not just Jewish people, yes, Jewish people, but churches, community centers, communities, because this is what had to happen. The aid organizations that were taking care of us in some way, and honestly, we don't know how that part worked. But we do know this. 3 things had to happen
To relocate
to
us
relocate you to a home.
someplace.
You had to find a home with everything in it. We came with a little satchel and $12 in American money. We had nothing. And there had to be a home with everything in it. Furniture, pots and
Dishes,
pans, linens,
linens,
flatware. I mean, everything had to be there. Toys for the kids, clothing for everybody. So you had to have a home with everything. How did that happen? That happened because people got together and made it happen, whether it was
And-
temples or churches or whoever.
organizations, communities.
Yeah. There had to be a job for the head of household that maybe didn't speak English or much. There had to be a school that took children who didn't speak English or not much English. So those 3 things, wherever that came together when it was your turn, however that worked, that's where you went. And that's how we landed in Duluth, Minnesota.
Okay.
I don't know if you know Duluth, Minnesota, but it
On
is
Lake Superior,
the
just
tip,
under Canada.
The tip of Lake Superior, the Great Lakes, one of the coldest places in the country. But that's where we went.
And fortunately, it was April.
Yeah, so it wasn't a
It wasn't-
blizzard
yeah,
at the
it-
moment.
Yeah, it was kind of springtime. So they put us on a train. Okay, we had a fun train ride.
Yeah.
I don't remember much about
No,
it,
but we'd never been on a
but somebody
train.
picked us up at the train station and drove us into this alley at the back of the 2-story, which of course was a duplex, right? And said that we would live.
We would go upstairs.
So we go up the stairs. The kids rushed up the stairs, and the first thing we see is a hallway, a back hallway, with this great big metal box, just a huge metal box. And of course, that turned out to be the ice box, right? They didn't have refrigerators in 1948, at least in our life.
When we tell this story to kids, their eyes, what do you mean, no refrigerator?
Yeah. And then, as time went by, we'd see the guy coming with the big hook with the huge block
blocks
of
of
ice.
ice.
He'd come up the stairs, and
That's how you kept your food
fill
cold.
up ice box. And then we went through a door, and there was
Well, turned out to be a kitchen.
Yeah, what did we know from a kitchen? There were cabinets and everything was there.
Pots and pans and dishes and
You can't believe there was a bathroom
off
the
the-
kitchen.
off the kitchen.
And it was just for us.
Yeah.
It was like a a miracle.
Yeah, we said, we felt like we had walked into a castle, only to find out that there was a dining room, a living room, and two bedrooms.
2 bedrooms.
And then we saw
yeah,
was it in the bedroom?
I think it was in the bedroom on a dresser.
A little wooden box about this big, and the person who was with us reached over and turned a knob, and all this music blasted out of this
we
box.
ran around the back to see if we could see the people that were in it,
We had never seen or heard of a
such
radio.
thing.
It was not
Everything was just this awakening of things,
it was an
unbelievable.
amazing experience
It
for
really
us,
was for us,
anyway.
yeah.
I don't know how
Other
our daddy or our stepmother felt about all this, but we thought we had become rich and lived in a castle.
Yeah, we did.
And they had a yard, fenced-in yard with beautiful lilac
Bushes all the
way around, and we just loved it. We just loved it. It was just unbelievable, one thing, after another. We would not want to be refugees today. Don't think that kind of thing happens. But at the time,
some people do open their homes.
Some
today,
people.
But it's not the same, I don't think. But we just couldn't believe it, and we did soon go to school.
And we always had hand-me-down clothes. We didn't know that, but they always were.
But they were
secondhand. But they were clothes. We didn't know people had more than one pair of shoes at a time.
Yeah,
we never.
It was pretty remarkable.
Or a closet with several items of clothing for each person. We didn't know about that.
That was pretty amazing, and we loved school. Well, the first day of school.
Yeah.
The teacher brought him, we're holding hands.
You have no idea. We looked like refugees.
We looked like we just stepped off
the boat, which we actually
did.
They used to cut our hair with a bowl, put a bowl and cut around it.
Yeah.
And so we the little girls with big brown eyes, and kind of shy. And
so somebody brought us into the classroom, the whole classroom of kids. A bit diverse too.
Yeah.
And we stood there
in front of the class.
And there was a
African
American girl. She was very large compared to everybody else. She took one look at us and just burst out laughing. She laughed so hard she was holding her stomach and fell on the floor.
She literally fell on the floor, and then the other kids started
laughing. So that was our first
entire class was laughing, and while we had no idea what was going on in terms of language, we knew they were laughing at us. Yeah. So it was very.
It was a little difficult.
It was hard for our first day, but she became a friend of ours.
She absolutely did, and her name was Leela Green.
Leela Green.
Yeah, and we used to play at her house and stuff later on. But
anyway, that was our first. But we loved school.
Loved our teachers.
Our teachers loved us. We worked hard. We had that fear driver in us always. Honestly, I was in graduate school before I realized that I didn't have to get an A in every class. Really, that it was nobody was watching. It took me that long to get over that. You have to have an A in every class. I almost did get an A in every class. I had a B in one class, but
we learned a lot of lessons, through the years, and we did all right.
Really, we were always grateful for what we had, and to this day, we are grateful for what we have, and we made a pretty good life for ourselves, even though we weren't very successful in marriages over the years.
Can I get you to summarize your lives, each of your lives on each of your lives on from, that time in Duluth, and I guess where you went, and family, education, work-wise, what happened to you?
Well, first, after 4 years in Duluth, when we were 12, our dad decided he should move us to Minneapolis, Minnesota, because it was a big town and there would be more opportunities for us. Now, we were 12, we were working. Things were getting harder and harder with our life at home. And then we became teenagers. We used to work till midnight at the cafe, get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, this is high school, to do our homework, take a bus, right?
Yeah, we used to take a bus to
and
school.
keep up our grades, no matter what, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but what happened, which was in the end a good thing, when we were in the 9th grade, they said to us, our parents, our stepmother and our dad, sat us down and said, now, you have to learn a trade. You have to learn to do something with your hands so that you can always support yourself, because nobody's going to ever take care of you. You can't count on that. So we are sending you to the Minneapolis Vocational High School, which is like a trade, like trade tech is here in Los Angeles, only it's at the high school level. We don't care what you want to do there. And they had things like airplane mechanic, auto mechanic, secretary, tailor. I mean, just name
cook,
it.
Whatever.
Cook, whatever trade you can think of, they had it.
They had it. So we, the two of us, were 13 years old, I think, went to the library. And we looked up in the encyclopedias, as there were no computers in 1953. And I remember sitting there looking through encyclopedias.
Yeah.
What kind of occupations do women
do?
Okay. And we found teacher, seamstress, waitress, secretary, and last, beauty operator, which is a hairdresser. That's what they used to be called.
Beauty operator.
And then we took the next step to find out what's involved in each job and how much can you make, what kind of salary, roughly. And of course, beauty operator won out, not only because it made the most money, because you got tips, but because it was creative, and we were.
And we were going to be on our feet. We were not going to be sitting behind
somewhere.
A desk.
And so
those were the things we talked about.
Yeah, that was our choice.
Being able to do some, and kind of helping people. We were attracted to that as well. And so we became full-fledged, licensed hairdressers at age 16 in our junior year.
End of our junior year, we took our state boards
and we
passed it.
Right, and at vocational high school, you spend half a day learning your trade and half a day in what they thought were the classes you needed for your trade. So the interesting thing was that they thought that hairdressers didn't need science or math. We never saw a number in high school, ever. We never took science, we never took math.
Don't ask us anything about algebra.
Yeah, please. We just didn't have that. What we took was English, something called civics. PE, gym.
Always had to have that.
I think that was about it in the morning, and then you learned to do hair and nails and faces and so forth. And then once we were licensed, in our senior year, we had our English, civics, and PE classes in the morning, and then we went to work in a beauty shop.
We worked an 8-hour job.
Yep. And we worked.
We both worked in good shops.
No matter what we did along the way, including that year, all the money went home. All the money went, whatever we made went to the household because, after all, they had to buy us clothes and
feed
feed
us.
us. And
In the early days when we first came to America, we were very poor.
very poor.
Our dad got a job in a woman's dress shop, unloading the trucks when they came and hanging up the clothes. And our stepmother, I believe, worked in a hospital
I think
in the
so.
kitchen. That's what I'm remembering. Not that they told us anything, but our meals, our food, even though it was food more than we had before, our dinners would consist of things like what we called
Greasy peasy,
you know,
rice and peas,
That was our dinner.
or spaghetti and scrambled eggs.
Mhm,
That
something
was a
like that.
common dinner.
And we ate like that for a long time until somewhere where Truman said that people should have chicken every Sunday.
Yeah.
And then every once in a while we would have a chicken on Sunday. And as years went by, it did get better.
Yeah, and we ate a lot of organ food
yeah.
because it was cheap,
Cheap,
then.
yeah.
Gizzards, liver,
yeah,
tongue,
yeah, we ate
brain. We ate
We ate brain.
pickled brain.
Mhm,
Yeah. We ate that. We ate because all of that was just very cheap
Yeah.
food.
Do you
were
still
not-
do you still eat that today?
Yeah,
Or did
we
you
like-
do you-
yeah,
we just
we
had
like
a
it.
tongue sandwich.
We
didn't
just, we just had a tongue
Couple
sandwich
days ago
from the
from the
deli,
deli.
which is very expensive now.
And very good.
And very good. Yeah, yeah, we do.
yeah.
We like liver and onions.
Yes,
We
love gizzards.
Yeah, yeah. We
Yeah.
still like that.
Yeah,
We love
it's true.
eggs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Um,
It's true.
yeah. And then, but we would have either a roast eventually on Sunday or baked chicken. And we
Something.
never ate out
No, never.
except on Sundays. On Sundays, they went after they got a car,
Which was 1956,
so we were 16.
16.
Every Sunday we would go on a drive out of the city and stop somewhere for pie and coffee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, we're 16. We didn't want to go on a drive and have pie and coffee, okay? And furthermore, being in the car, we were not allowed to talk loud or to sing, which we loved
We love
to do.
sing.
We wanted to sing in the car, you know. We were not allowed to do that. Furthermore, we were not allowed to cook because we might make a mess or waste food.
Yeah.
So we were never really taught
to cook.
Once in a while, one of us would sneak in the kitchen when my dad was cooking, which is when he would tell us
Something.
about these little things, you know, but
Yep.
we were not allowed to do that. So we never learned to cook.
Right. And then if we said we don't want to go on a drive, which we eventually did, they said, okay, and then we'd be locked in the house. And we always lived upstairs. And we were scared that there would be a fire and we wouldn't be able to get out. That was like a very real thing to us. Like something could happen and we'd be trapped upstairs. We'd look out the window and see how far was it to jump from, I mean, so that was probably some leftover thing from childhood, I would think, although maybe any rational person
would
would
think
say
so.
we could have a fire and couldn't get out.
Yeah.
But that was one of the things that, that we lived with.
And then every day was always hard when we'd come home and have to clean up and everything, and that never stopped through the years. And just waiting for them or her to come home. And in the meantime, as the years went by, things got more and more difficult with Steffi.
Yeah.
We just couldn't get along with her. One of the reasons was that our stepmother wouldn't allow us to participate in school activities
without her.
Unless Steffi also
had to be with us. And we would be in talent shows, like we always were. And she would have to sing with us, but she couldn't sing
couldn't
at all.
sing at all.
We weren't great
we're not great
singers,
singers.
but we carried a tune.
Yeah, we can,
Yeah.
and we can harmonize
Yeah.
together. Just
Anyway, though that it just continued.
Yeah.
You know.
The most blatant thing that I remember about incidents with Steffi and our stepmother is that we would argue with her. We would maybe fight with her. I don't know. It was always her against us or us against her.
Poor thing.
And everything. I know.
Feel sorry for
we
her
do a
sometimes.
little bit, but she would be fine, and then she'd hear the door open when her mother was coming home. She would throw herself on the floor and cry and say how horrible we were and that we had done this to her and, that kind of thing, so that we would get in trouble. So,
Yeah.
that was just an extra layer.
So that's why when we each got a boyfriend in high school or a boy who became a friend to us, my boyfriend got a master key once and used to unlock the door for us when they were on a drive and we were locked in, and then we would get out and go to the park or do something out of the house.
But always come back on
Always
time.
come back because we knew about how long they would be, but until a neighbor snitched on us.
Well, because I think that was because one time one of the guys brought a ladder
Oh,
up to
maybe.
the second floor
Yeah.
window. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think we
Maybe
got
that's
caught.
when we
Yeah.
got caught, yeah. But in any case, that was, so they, my boyfriend who I married to get out of the house, he was a 2 year, he was when we were freshmen, he was already a senior.
like
He was a
David, yeah.
senior
Mhm.
at vocational high school. And he was Italian, and he had a group of them, people that he remained friends with all his life. And the story is he saw me walking down the hall, and he told his friend, "I'm going to marry that girl." And that's what happened.
What was his name?
Huh?
What was his name?
Robert Lepora, Lepora. And we're friends to this day, by
Yeah.
the way. We
We all get
eventually
together.
reconnected, and when we go to Minneapolis, we see him and his wife. He remarried and had kids and grandkids and all of that.
And the four of us, when Roger and my
When-
husband, we'd all go visit.
We'd all go
you know,
visit
yeah.
them.
Mhm.
But anyway, it wasn't a good match, and it lasted less than 2 years. And we came here to California on a vacation, and I just fell in love with Los Angeles. I mean, that was it. I really said, why am I living in Minnesota? I was 18 years old.
And what was it about Los Angeles?
The weather, the lifestyle, the freeways, the ability to
Excitement.
get around. It was a 24-hour market. Hello. And there were I think 9 television stations, something like that. I mean, it was just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It was just the life that, and I knew that I could live here, take my California hairdressing exam, and immediately be employed. It was you could always get a job as a hairdresser. Yeah. So I kind of said to Bob what Forrest said to Ema, you can stay or you can go, but I'm going. And we went home, and I started packing. And poor guy, he did come along, but it just didn't. We were not. I mean, he started talking about kids and domestic things, and I definitely was never like that. It was just something in me. We never talked about that before we got married.
Yeah. Well, we never talked about getting married and having kids.
No,
or
we
what
never
you
talked
would
about
do,
that at all.
ever.
We never.
had no clue about
Yeah.
anything like that.
So I had a deep desire to go to college and become a teacher. That was my passion. I've always talked about that. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to college and become a teacher. And when I talked to them about that possibility, as we neared graduation from high school, I said, could I live at home if I found a way to go to University of Minnesota? That's where I wanted to go. Could I live at home to, is that possible? And they said, sure, if you pay rent. I said, okay. Would you help me with books and absolutely not. There was no help. So I couldn't figure out a way to do that at all. This was before I got married, and I just kind of gave up on that. And it was many years before I finally realized my dream of going to school, and I started here in California. Years later, junior college, took typing. Started out real slow and then became an English major, and there was no stopping. In fact, by then I was married again, and my husband encouraged me to go to school because he knew that was a dream of mine. But when I hit graduate school, he said, that's enough. And we grew totally apart. But we were married for 10 years. And by that time, I was, off and running. So.
Can you tell us about your connection to where we are today, the University of Southern California?
Yeah, I went to Pasadena Community City College, they were called then. It took me 5 years to get my 2-year degree, but by then I had become an English major, something I found was a great strength of mine when I had teachers who said, Monica, you know how to write, you know how to analyze, you really get this stuff. You have to go on in school. So I went on to Cal State LA and finished my bachelor's degree in English. And I was offered a job at the YWCA in Pasadena where I'd been volunteering. I'd started volunteering. And there I was a youth services director and worked with kids and families and just loved that. Even though I had an English degree, I was doing kind of social worky things. And one day my supervisor called me in and said, Monica, the National YWCA is giving 3 scholarships to graduate school for their employees nationwide. Three women who are working for the Y nationally are going to get a full scholarship to the university of their choice, the major of their choice, and I think you should apply. And I applied, and I got one of them. Well, I was surrounded by USC School of Social Work graduates at the Y who were working there, and they were already on me. You've got to go to school. You do so well with people and all this. I never even thought about anything else but going to USC for a social work graduate degree, and that's what I did. I showed up at USC with a full scholarship from outside the university. And honestly, my connection to USC, it was so wonderful. Graduate school was like a highlight of my life. I loved all the learning. I loved the topic. I loved everything about it. I learned so much. I was so happy. I was happy to do the work. And I had to work as well, and did hair. That got me through college, by the way. I worked my way through college doing hair, and that was really a good thing. So that's how I got initially connected to USC, because I knew a lot of USC grads and kind of got talked into it. And then I immediately, upon graduation, got a job out of my second-year field placement, which was with the Regional Institute in Social Welfare a regional of, I don't know that you're old enough to know what HEW is, Health, Education, and Welfare, which is now the Department of whatever. Not that anymore, but that was the old kind of welfare social services department in Washington. And we were in Region 9, and I got a research job there right out of school and began teaching. They hired me right away to teach. And at that time, they had an undergraduate degree. I taught undergraduate at first and then graduate. But pretty soon I had an opportunity to work in other outside, and I found that I wasn't really interested in a full-time professor job because I could see that professors didn't always teach. They did a lot of other things, and I was really only interested in teaching. You know, they were on committee. I don't know what a lot of pressure. So when
they had to write and write and
write, which I did anyway.
Yeah,
I have many publications, but I didn't have to have them. So I started jobs outside of the university. But in the meantime, I got a sort of a, what do I want to say, a mandate from the dean of the School of Social Work, who said to me after some years, you know, if you want to keep teaching and doing research here, you really need to look like you're getting a doctorate. At least, you know, start. And I said, no, I don't want any more school. I'm fine, you know, where I am. He said, you know, and I said to him, look, if you find me the money, I'll find the time. And he did. Found me a full scholarship from the Department of Mental Health and called me one day and said, I have your scholarship, come to school. And I started working on the doctorate and with a full scholarship. And I continued to work as well because nobody was paying my rent. I was married up to actually my master's, so I was on my own for a little while. And, you know, the doctoral program changed my life because my research was in gerontology. I did a federally funded project at Andrus Gerontology Center, which was the first gerontology center in the world. And I started doing my research there about a year after they opened. And my topic was something that had never been done before. And I got to spend 50 years in gerontology.
And what was
working
the topic?
On my topic was to formalize a way of working with poor, old, frail people that the government has been throwing into nursing homes because there was no place else for them to go, or psych wards, and they became very expensive. So they were looking for ways to do something else with them. And I didn't create this system, but I found people and organizations that were doing pieces of how to work with people to keep them at home and support them at home. And it was something that became what was called case management or care management. We didn't have that then. And I developed the system, the process of doing this. How do you do it? What do you need to know? How do you work with the community? What does it take? How do you work with families? How do you know, step one, step two, this is what you have to do. And created that whole thing. I couldn't even find any literature for references. I had to go to business literature and deal with coordination, because it's care coordination, which is what we called it at the time, care coordination. So I used all these hundreds of references, and how do you coordinate people? How do you coordinate companies together, businesses together, and so forth? And that launched me. When my dissertation was printed, I was the universal the universal expert in this.
First, somebody had to type that
My sister typed my dissertation with 11 carbon copies. Absolutely. And then my husband and my best friend read it, and for mistakes and everything, and then you had to retype some pages, and you had to try and erase 11 carbon copies. It was quite a thing, but I got it through. I got it through, even though not everybody understood what that was all about, but it became a big thing, and now it's everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
In some form or another. Yeah. And I trained so many people around the world and consulted with public, private entities. I became a pioneer in the arena of coordinating care.
When was it when you got your PhD? What year was that?
1980.
Right.
And I worked on it, the dissertation part, for about 4 years, and then I immediately was picked up by the state of California to do their Medicaid waiver program, which required this kind of work to keep people at home. And someone up there read my dissertation and said, that's the person who needs to do that part of it. And I worked for UC Berkeley that was doing evaluation on it, but I stayed in LA. And then I went on to a hospital, nonprofit hospital, that had received a major grant to, quote, do something about seniors, and created with a colleague, the two of us created a model program of providing services for older adults and their families who didn't necessarily have to be patients of the hospital, but for the community. And then I became known for that kind of work.
It was called Senior Care Network.
And consulted. And, I worked at Huntington Hospital in Pasadena for 10 years. Eventually directed that department, had 50 people in my department, doing care management and case management for low income, as well as we created a fee for services for people who had money but also didn't know what to do with their mother, didn't, and created a whole system. And then went on to, and all this time I was teaching here, at USC. I was teaching at least one class, often two, in both schools, gerontology and I never took a class in gerontology, but they didn't have them when I was in school.
That's right.
There were no classes, but I taught for years, faculty there and School of Social Work, graduate level. So that's kind of my career. And then I got recruited to Santa Monica to run a little nonprofit, and was there for many years. I retired from there, called the Center for Healthy Aging, and we had a huge array. We weren't playing bingo. It wasn't a senior center. We had mental health and care management, and
really
peer
great.
counseling, a great agency. I got to do a lot there. And in the meantime, I'm doing a lot of consultation. I've traveled everywhere, consulting, lecturing, training, England and Japan, China, Australia. I really, and a lot around the state, in this way of working with people and setting up, helping a community support the whole idea of aging well and supporting people in their homes, or helping them if they needed to be elsewhere. a lot of work. And my social work training that I got here, invaluable, invaluable in understanding family issues and understanding communities and understanding systems of care, in coordinating and collaborating. I mean, that's what you learn in social work. And I have actually established a scholarship in my name for social workers who are interested in aging.
Thank you. Anyone any sort of names of particular people at USC who you'd like to mention who are important to you, particularly important to you? I'm sure there are hundreds of people, but
Yeah, lots of people. Genevieve Carter, who ran the Research Institute in Social Welfare and gave me a chance to do the foundations of research that carried me through writing grants and doing many projects, millions of dollars of grants I wrote over the years and how to do that. Frances Feldman, I don't know if you ever knew her, just a remarkable professor who started here at USC in the School of Social Work in 1939, the year I was born,
Yeah.
and still taught. She was a policy teacher and got me interested in policy, in how, why systems are the way they are and what can we do about them. She was really something. Sam Taylor, a phenomenal professor who really knew communities. He taught community organization and how you can work in communities and what you can do when you do it together. When you work together toward a common goal. He did that. Sam Taylor.
Yeah, Sam.
Yeah, he was he was a wonderful teacher, and was a wonderful person. There were lots of others, but those are the three. Bruce Jansen, who I think is still a professor here, although he should be about retirement age. I was in his first semester. He turned my life around because he taught research. And remember, this is the girl who didn't see a number in high school. Believe me, that was tough. But he lit a flame in me about research, how you can look at a problem, how you can look at something that's going on and figure out what's going on and what are the issues and how do you solve these problems, that you can do something. May not work, but not everything works, but you can do something. And certainly Maury Hamovich, who was the dean of the School of Social Work and encouraged me so much and helped me out when I was having some personal problems in my second marriage and I wanted to leave school. When I was in my last semester of my MSW program, I was about to leave school because I needed to leave my husband, and I didn't know how I was going to live or whatever. And he said, "You're not leaving school. I'm not letting go of you," and found me help to stay in school. And the guy who got me my scholarship for my doctoral program, I owe a lot to USC. I feel that way. Ray Steinberg, who was the head of the policy lab at the Andrews Gerontology School and the one who got me involved in the project out of which I did my dissertation, who gave me that opportunity. He's gone. He passed away, but and he was a big name in the early pioneer range of people who started gerontology. A lot of people, yeah. A great, I think, university, And of course, I've been involved in it since '72. I don't know if I can do the math enough, but it's many years.
Yeah.
And I'm still involved as now a donor. And I'm not a person that has a lot of money, and it took me some time to get enough money together to do this scholarship. But it's very important to me because I think social work and aging are a match made in heaven, and I have set it up so that it would be preferred that it be a low-income student who otherwise might not be able to be at USC, if not without a scholarship. So, and I do want people in social work to go into aging as much as possible because it's a match made in heaven. It's a really good combination, and we need them to help. So that's my story.
Can I go to you, Gita? I wanted to ask you, from the moment you woke up in your new apartment and put the Jimi Hendrix record on, can you give us a summary of your life from then on?
Yeah. 6 months later, I got married to my high school sweetheart. Yeah. He too, he and Bob, I think, were in the same class.
Yeah, they were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And a year later, I had my first baby, and then a year after that, I had the second one, and by the time I was 22, I had 3. He was a lovely person, a really good man.
What was his name?
David Anderson. And it was through his family that I first experienced Christmas. Okay. And all this time, all the years, I always worked first. I continued being a hairdresser. Okay. And as we had these kids, he would work during the day and I would work in the evenings. Because many beauty salons were open late, and so we made it work, and we eventually got a house and so on. But our interests pretty much fell apart. David was an amazing dragster driver. Okay.
Yeah, race car.
Yeah, he was really a quiet, nice man
Unassuming.
who just had this thing about driving
Passion.
cars. Okay. Even in high school, a lot of our social life was taking engines out of cars and, with the group of his friends and so on. But he eventually became a professional dragster driver and unfortunately died on the drag strip when he was only 36. Yeah. I married again. I had another child. And so then after that didn't work out, and I was a single mom with 4 kids at that for a number of years. Okay. I decided that rather than go on welfare, which I had every right to do.
And I kept encouraging, you're the kind of person that should be on welfare because you're going to get off welfare.
Yeah. Anyway, I just decided to work 2 jobs. So I worked 2 full-time jobs. My kids were preteens and teens and took care of each other and so on. And I managed to find us housing. I had a very interesting experience. I was still living in Minneapolis. When I found myself alone with 4 kids, okay, I tried to find us a place to live. And landlords would say, well, can you maybe have a couple of the kids live somewhere else? It was, for some reason during that time, which was in the early 70s, I ran into that again and again. No, I can't. We're sticking together. And eventually I was able to find a place. And I worked during the day by the way, around 1972, I decided I was done with hair. We didn't have the words burnout back then, but that's
Yeah,
pretty much what it was. I woke up one morning and said, I don't really care how Mrs. Schmidt's hair comes out today. right? Yeah. So I decided, what can I do? I have to support these kids, and I remembered that in ninth grade I did really well in typing, so I decided I could be a secretary, and I got a job. And as a secretary, and then eventually found a job in a very large corporation, which no longer exists, Control Data Corporation in Minneapolis. And then in the evening, I would work from 7:30 to 4:30, go home, make sure the kids had dinner and were doing their homework and whatever I could. And then I'd go off, and I was a cocktail waitress in a very high-end place. I didn't have to serve food, just drinks. And at first, I said to my neighbor who got me the job, I don't drink. I don't know anything about alcohol. And she said, oh, you don't have to. Just take the order and tell the bartender. It did work out really well. I did really well. Got a lot of tips, and it really saw me through the years of, having enough money. And that was fine. And by 1977, I decided that I would move to California. I would change
Came
my
to
life.
her senses.
Yeah, change my life and go to the only person I had. But I did used to come and visit her through
A lot.
all those years, through all the 20 years.
Can we mention that while I was at Huntington Hospital, she came to visit me pregnant. Her husband was in Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
and her daughter was born at Huntington Hospital.
It's true.
A surprise. I don't know why we.
I know why I
while you
came
were
that
visiting,
late.
you
Yeah.
came that late. Yeah.
I did, yeah. And I knew that morning that I was in labor, but I went to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
She
knew
was
it was.
working.
That was my
with-
fourth child.
was working with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, I said to Monica, okay, I think I'm ready to go in. So anyway, yeah. I moved out here and brought two of the kids with me. We set up a life here, but the month before I moved, I came to California, I got an apartment, I got a job, and I got my kids enrolled in school. So that when we drove out here with my big old station wagon pulling a trailer with everything I owned, we came to my apartment, right? We came to a place to live, and everything was set up, and I was able to go to work. Yep. So I like being prepared, right? And we started our life here, and I want to say that both of those kids went right back to Minneapolis after they
Soon as they
graduated.
could.
They're just Midwestern kids, Yeah. And in the meantime, I worked for a year at UCLA, right?
Yeah.
And then I did sort
Eleanor.
of off and on jobs. I did work occasionally for Frances Feldman, for instance. She had me transcribing
Oral histories.
old social work oral histories,
histories.
so that they could be put on computer, right? And I did that for a long time, so I did do this and that. And in the meantime, something we haven't even mentioned in our
Yeah.
life,
We
we
picked
fell
up
into
music. Playing music. I was just hanging out with. I was dating a blues guitar player, and I used to go to jams with him. And I'm emptying ashtrays and serving beer, and everybody else in the room is playing. And I used to whine about that all the time. I want to play something, but when I go like this on a guitar, it sounds terrible, that kind of thing. So one day he shows up at my door with a banjo in one hand and a Pete Seeger How to Play the Five-String Banjo book in the other hand. He says, I'm tired of your whining. I've rented this banjo for you for 3 months, and here's a book. It'll tell you how to play it. And he left. And I opened the book, and I knew immediately I was in trouble because they were talking about keys and tuning and things I knew
We
nothing.
don't
We
even
don't read
know
music. To this
music.
day, we don't read
Yeah.
music. But long story short, eventually learned to play it. And I don't want to go into it. It's a long story, but a year and a half later, I had a band. It was and our first performance was at Magic Mountain. We were 4 women, and I thought we were terrible, but I got a call almost immediately for I saw Caught Your Act at Magic Mountain. Love your band. Come play at my coffee house in Venice. And one thing led to the other. And then a year later,
approximately, yeah.
Approximately.
In September 1977, I moved to Los Angeles, and early 78, I think it was, when someone gave the band a bass, a stand-up
bass. We were banjo, fiddle. We were banjo, fiddle, guitar, and mandolin, and we sang.
Yeah, and
all women.
Mm-hmm. I came. I don't know. I was at her house or whatever, and they had inherited this bass, and they said,
You're going to be our bass player."
Yeah, okay, and how do I pick this thing up? Twice as tall as I am practically, because it was a full size.
Yeah, it was a full size bass.
Mm-hmm.
That one was a full size bass.
So they sent me off with the bass to someone who could teach me how to play the bass, the stand-up bass. And I went quite far out where he lived with this bass, and he said, "Okay, so this, you just play the string below it in whatever key they're playing, and the rest will come." This is what he told me, and I'll see you, and sent me away.
That was it.
That was it.
Started playing the bass.
I started playing.
And I should just explain very quickly that I learned to play the banjo. I took a few lessons just so I'd get it right.
From the same guy.
From the same guy who taught bass, taught her the bass. And but I had no idea the type of music I was playing, because this guy never talked about playing with other people, jamming, and all of that. I didn't know anything about the music I was playing, the particular type of. You'd be surprised how many styles of banjo there are. I didn't know anything about that. So we ended up playing a kind of music which is called old time fiddle tune music, dance music, basically barn dance music, what people used to do in the Appalachian Mountains, or maybe still do in the mountain music. So it wasn't bluegrass, which is what everybody thinks it is, but same configuration, but different purpose. It was a more dance band kind of thing than bluegrass, which is very much performing. Each instrument plays solos, and we don't do that. We always play together. So that's, so we were very unique in playing this style of music and being all women.
We were now 5 women.
We were now 5. And
I did eventually, through playing, because 3 weeks after they shoved this thing at me, we had a gig. I had to learn 27 tunes most of which I'd never heard before.
Yeah, it was foreign music to us, really. We had no music in our life except the radio.
Down the side body of the bass, we had put up tablature, which just tells you
what key and what chord.
And what chord, right down the waist of the bass. And we made it through that first gig with my fingers bleeding by the end of the gig. But at any rate, it was fine. And we became a solid band.
We did. We played Disneyland. We played Knott's Berry Farm, Magic Mountain, Calico.
Lots of festivals.
Lots of bluegrass festivals. We played in many house concerts, Pep Boys openings.
Yeah, whatever. Anything but bars, because we couldn't stand the smoke.
And we were all women.
And it
wasn't a good match.
Yeah. We played all the harvest festivals up and down the coast.
Craft festivals. We toured. We made 2 albums. And we were doing this. I was working on my dissertation.
And I was
teaching.
Working.
And she was working.
I was working. I always worked.
What was the name of your band?
Old Mother Logo, which is a fiddle tune from Ireland that anybody in old time music would know. It's about 300-year-old tune.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we had, in 1984, 40 years ago
This month.
this month, we were involved in an accident, a
Car
car accident. Someone hit us from behind.
The band was.
The whole band was in there, and all our instruments, our sound systems, and so on. We were
We
coming back.
We were coming back from a tour.
In Northern California. The next day, the reason we were coming home in the night, that night, was 2 o'clock in the morning, right? Something like that.
2 o'clock in the morning.
It was my youngest daughter's 17th birthday the next day, and my best friend was getting married, and we were going to play at her wedding on March 24th, the next day. And we were hit from behind, only car on the freeway. Monica was driving, and we had an old car and
Well, we had a Suburban, a great big
Chevy.
car.
But I mean, the only seatbelt was for the driver. They didn't have
They didn't have
seatbelts
seatbelts,
then.
yeah.
And so I was thrown out of the car on the first roll, landed on my hip on the freeway, okay? And they kept rolling 2 more times, and unfortunately, one of our members also was thrown out the
Through
front window and
killed.
perished.
Died.
Right then and there. And it was pretty terrible. Everyone was somewhat hurt, but I was horribly hurt. But look, I survived. I'm here, and I was in a body cast. I was in, wheelchair and crutches and cane. 2.5 years, a 2.5-year recovery, and then I was ready to go back to work. And I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. And Monica said to me, "Why don't you call John Pinus at USC and see?" And I had met, of course, I met everybody.
That's the Andrews Gerontology
Yeah.
Center.
Met everybody she ever worked with and participated in things and whatnot. And see if maybe he has something or he knows of something. So I called John, and just at that time he said, "This is just perfect. My assistant just left to go on maternity leave. Why don't you come and fill in for her? You'll be here a few months and you can look around and see what there is." And I said, "Great," So I went there. I didn't have much to do. I had to just oversee some of the students that they were doing their work and things like that. But I was at the Andrus Gerontology Center. And just then, in about a few weeks later, the new dean was coming from the NIA, the National Institutes on Aging, from the East Coast, to be the new dean. Jim Buren was just retiring, okay? And John Pinus said to me, Dr. Pinus said, "Why don't you go and apply? He's going to need an assistant." And I said, "Oh, that's silly. I don't know anything about the university or the center or anything. I've only been here 3 weeks or something, Just go." This is what he said to me, like this. "Just go. Just bring your resume down there." So I did, and I was called in for an interview with Dr. Edward Schneider, and he really didn't look at my resume. He only looked at my letters of recommendation that I had collected through the years, and he hired me. Okay, and so I became his executive assistant and worked with him for almost 20 years. Yeah, about 18 and a half, almost 19. And we did very well together. He then decided in 2004,
Yeah.
to step down as dean. He wanted to do some more work
Well, you wanted to teach.
Well, he wanted to teach, and he also wanted to do some work at the hospital as a geriatric doctor. He did have an MD. Mm-hmm. And so I found myself without a job. I still had kids to support, and I wanted a full-time job, and I couldn't find anything of that level here at USC. And sadly, I decided I would just leave here, you know, and I did. And for the first time in my life, I was 5 weeks without a job. And then one day I got a call from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. It was a message. This is Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. We were wondering if you might be interested in applying for some work here. So I called them and set it up. Okay, so I went and I did all kinds of tests, and then they took me around to 3 places to interview for a position. The first 2 I wouldn't even touch, but the third one was in the Department of Psychiatry, for working for the chairman of the department as his executive assistant. There were like 10 people there to interview me. And after talking for quite a while, Dr. Rappaport, Mark Rappaport, who was the chairman, lovely man.
Really,
Yeah,
really.
He said, well, why should I hire you? And I said, because I'll take care of you. That was it. We had the best, working relationship. He was wonderful to work for. It was an exciting and rewarding job. I dealt with appointments for him and patients in the place. And at that time, Cedars-Sinai Department of Psychiatry dealt with people from the entire community, pay or not, it didn't matter. They took every kind of insurance, Medicare, Medi-Cal, and so on. Had wonderful programs for anybody who needed it, including children. They also did children. And it was such a wonderful and rewarding place to work, and I just loved it. But then at some point, the hospital decided that we were more of a detriment than a money-making department, and cut us off for any support. And all those programs went away. And it was absolutely horrible.
Devastating.
Everybody lost their job. Hundreds of people, except about 13 of us. And the only reason I still had a job is because I worked for the chairman, right? So it was really, really sad and a terrible, terrible time. But then in 2014, I decided I better retire. I was 74 years old, and it was time. My kids had been after me for 10 years to retire, right? I should have retired when I left USC, but and I did retire. I went to the dean and I said, sometime over this summer, I'm going to retire. And he said, are you all right? It was so sweet. I said, I'm fine, and that's why I'd like to do this now while I can still spend some years with my kids and so on. So I did retire, and
Yeah, and I retired in 2009 from the Center for Healthy Aging in Santa Monica, and that was my plan, was to retire when I was 70. And I did, and made the announcement sort of to the community that I was retiring. And I got a call from USC, School of Social Work, said, we heard you're retiring, now you have time to come back and teach. Well, I mean, to extend your teaching. And they made me a nice offer, and I came back, and I taught for another 6 years. So I was 76 when I called one day and said, this is my last semester. I was ready to retire. And, my husband was a fiddle player, and I was a banjo player, which is a match made in heaven. We met at a jam. And this is the husband I was together with for 45 years.
What was his name?
Roger Goodman. And he passed away last year, very suddenly and very quickly. but we had a wonderful 45 years full of music and fun. He was very highly
great.
intelligent. He was a real punster with a great sense of humor.
We had so
very,
much fun
very
with him,
clever. We
yeah.
had so much fun. And the three of us, the band was retired in 1987. The
After
the
10
working
years.
band. We just woke up one morning and said, enough. We never meant to be professional musicians. Let's stop this.
It was just a hobby gone wild.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But the three of us, Roger and the Bookends, we were called. We performed
For-
upon request. Anybody who asked for us to play, we played for. We didn't. It wasn't
Money
about
or no
money
money, it didn't matter.
We had a lot of fun.
We sure-
The three of us traveled together because her husband not so interested. We traveled. We went to festivals. We took cruises,
You
and
connected with McCabe's, and
we
Well,
did.
we-
Our first album was recorded live at
Live at
McCabe's.
McCabe's, yeah.
oh, do you know Pete Steinberg, the
No,
banjo teacher? No,
it is now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no,
we're not
we're-
connected there now, except we go and see people that we know who are performing. But we've gone all over the country to festivals, and we play. Now, we do this now. We go to festivals. We have a large community of friends in that community, and we
go
go
to
to
jams
jams and
and-
parties. And so we play not as much as we used to, but because I do a great deal of volunteering. I'm also a Rotarian for many, many years.
And she's going to be president of the Santa Monica
Rotary Club next
Club
year. I'm
next year.
president-elect. I've been in that club for 29 years. I really believe in service above self, which is the motto
their
of
motto.
Rotary.
And she's warning me that I will be busy
Yeah,
when she becomes president.
it's a huge job to be president of a large. We're the third largest club.
Yeah.
But I also volunteer for a couple of foundations and nonprofits.
And I spend a lot of time with my
the
family,
with
which
the
now
kids.
consists of 5 children, 12 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren. I am so grateful to have been able to produce that and to be
The grand dame
the
of the
grand
family.
dame of this whole clan. We feel like our family has been rebuilt from everybody we lost in
She's
the war.
replaced our family. She really has. Last Thanksgiving, we get together every Thanksgiving in Minneapolis, and last Thanksgiving we sat 47 people, all family, and a little bit extended because now we have some of the grandkids, in-laws, who are coming to our gathering.
And 3 of my children are grandparents, which blows my mind. Which, of course, makes me a great grandmother and you a great aunt.
Yeah, I mean it's wonderful. This is a
We love it.
wonderful family. It's not just a family, but everybody in it. They're great people. They're just great people, and we feel unbelievably lucky. I don't know that it's the luck. It was a
I
lot
don't
of
know what
work.
it
You
is.
did all the work.
Yeah.
I helped a little. I got to be aunt and help this one and that one,
Yeah.
in various
And
ways.
I, too, have been with my third husband for 47 years.
now.
and his name
Is G.W. Martin.
G-E-E.
Well, yeah.
Well, you gotta write
Yeah.
it down.
Well, he likes it either way.
Okay.
Yeah. But
Either way.
anyway, yeah. He will be 85 years old Friday.
Oh,
Tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
That is tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
But we feel extremely grateful for the opportunities we have gotten living here. We've worked hard, obviously. We did our share, I think, but we've been given opportunities.
yes, we have.
In many ways that have enhanced our lives and enabled us to be, I think, pretty successful in our work, eventually in our marriage. And I think it's pretty good that we've both been together with our guys for
I
more
think
than
so.
45 years.
We may have learned some lessons. I'm
I
not
think
sure. It
we
just
may
turned
have.
out to be.
Yeah. And you know, to live the life we live, full of music and
Fun,
most
and
fun at this
kids and
stage.
families. And,
We have our homes and our
Mhm.
uh, huge circles of friends, work friends, volunteer friends,
Yep.
Rotary friends, music friends. You know, we have these massive circles of friends and family, of course,
family.
a whole circle of family. I think we're pretty. I hate to keep using the word lucky, but fortunate, really,
Fortunate.
and
And blessed, I guess.
we are very blessed and very grateful for all that we have.
Can I ask, as we come towards wrapping up the interview, I have a couple of sort of
Sure.
final questions to ask, in no particular order. I guess I'm just wondering, in the U.S., did you ever have any experiences of anti-Semitism here?
You know, interestingly enough, the one experience, well, no, it wasn't anti-Semitism.
No.
It was I'm thinking of the school.
School. Mhm.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was racist, but it wasn't about us. In a way, we had a locker in high school next to an African American boy, schoolmate, and we used to talk with him. Now, in Shanghai, we really saw all kinds of people, hugely diverse.
It was just every day.
Every
to
day
us.
there, you know, it was every day we didn't, and we actually had a teacher who called us in and said, I know that you weren't born here or raised here, but in this country, we don't talk to people like that. And she named him. And we were absolutely stunned.
Yeah.
We had no idea. You know, so like I say, that was more racist, which didn't stop us from talking to him at all.
Yeah.
But personally,
No.
we're not aware of ever. I don't know why exactly. We could have, I don't know. It just, we're not aware of an actual.
I mean, when we first came to the States, we were the only Jewish kids in the school, as well as almost in junior high school.
In junior high school, at vocational high
Vocational,
school.
I think there might have been one.
Maybe,
I don't know.
but in our elementary school, we were the only Jewish kids. And in fact, that school in Duluth, Minnesota, had us do school assemblies to talk about Jewish holidays.
And talk a bit about our childhood. And
we were kids.
We
were kids, but they had us do
barely
that.
speaking English.
Yeah, but and
The whole school
the whole
would
school
be
was
there.
The all the students were there.
I think we were practicing for what we do now, which is to give
Our talks.
our
We're speaking now 2 to 4 times a month on our experience in Shanghai as Shanghai survivors. Somewhere,
and we
schools, temples,
yeah,
havaras, at
the
both
two
museums.
Yeah.
Mostly in person now, but
Yeah.
sometimes on Zoom.
And we just returned from a trip to Connecticut and to Philadelphia to give talks.
Yeah, we were
Yeah, we
invited
really
back there.
Had a great time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
it
did
was
have
really
a great
fun.
time. Yeah, we just got back last week. Yeah, it was a great trip. So, gosh, we have a lot to be grateful for.
Do you draw any parallels between what you experienced as Jews during the World War II and the treatment of other groups at other times and other places?
Meaning what's happening to other groups like now?
I mean, in terms of different kinds of racism
Yeah,
or
there've been-
treatment of refugees, this kind of thing.
Well, yeah, I think there are a lot of parallels. And I think how can I say this delicately? When a certain person became important in the political arena, I, for the first time, got a knot in my stomach. I've always felt safe here. In all the travels that we've done, I was
Yeah.
always happy to hit American ground, American soil, and I'm home and safe. And I still have that knot in my stomach.
Yeah.
I do not feel as safe as I used to. And it's, I think it's some horrible thing that's going on around the world that would happen to us and our 6 million happening again. It's happening again. And now I'm, older and
Aware
aware
of what it could mean.
and feeling a bit helpless.
And what do you see that's different and has changed? What would you highlight?
Different today?
Yeah, that stopped you feeling safe, whereas before you felt safe.
Well, I feel like it could happen again. It could happen that, now it's these people and these people. It could happen to us again. It could happen to us again because of the anti-Semitism that you see. I mean, we were on our way to Sinai Temple a couple of months ago to give a talk. And on the way there, driving, we got a text, "Don't come. There's been a threat. We're locked down. Go home."
Go home. And we turned
That's
around.
pretty direct,
Yeah, it
It's
is.
pretty direct.
And one time we found ourselves, when all this was happening, all the bombings and threats and things at the temples, schools, we found ourselves calling to see what they were doing to ensure the
Yeah,
safety
were
of
we
speakers who
gonna
are
be
coming to
safe
talk. Are
there?
we going to be all right?
Are we going to be okay there?
Yeah.
And they assured us that they had extra security. So it is personal, but it's now with the sources of communication, and everything is right there in our face every day. It's
Some horrible
scary.
thing happening.
So I don't know how people are dealing with it. I don't know what to do about it. I'd like to do
I'd
something.
like to do something, that's
but
right.
I don't exactly know. It's bigger than, and so I think we kind of curl up in our corner of the world and try to take care of things that we can. I don't know what else to do. We are caring. We care for other people. We help wherever we can. And that's what we have to do.
In relation to this, how has it been for you? Obviously learning about the October 7th attacks in Israel and obviously the subsequent conflict. How has that
Well,
At
affected
first,
you?
at first
first
it was
it
just, we
was-
couldn't believe that had happened, and of course our sister's there. We were calling her every day, and she told us about they could hear the bombings in Tel Aviv, and there were air raid sirens, and everything shut down, no
And
school,
there
no
was
shops.
everything was closed.
Closed, and we kept calling and calling, or she would call us to assure us they were all right. But we also feel that both sides are wrong. Both
Yeah. Nobody's
sides are wrong.
right
Nobody's
now.
right.
I mean,
yeah.
now the way things are
yeah,
going.
Yeah, it's,
I wouldn't know how to solve that problem, but I can't say it's all Israel, it's all Hamas, or it's all this one, it's all that one. I'm, I don't know. I don't know. It's just gotten out of hand.
And
And I feel, excuse
Go
me, I
ahead.
feel like it has a lot to do with egos and pride.
yeah, of course. Yeah.
There's no reasoning.
And
There's
greed.
nothing
Greed.
rational and greed.
yeah.
It's all
exactly.
about those things, and it's not really about what you see superficially.
Yeah.
It's not it's not right. It's not right all the way around. It's not right.
But talking to Dorothy in Israel, you get a sense of the passion that they have that Hamas is completely wrong.
Yeah.
They were attacked, and
Well, they were.
Netanyahu is doing the right thing, and and they all feel that way. You talk to somebody from there, and and we're kind of going, oh, well, he's not really all the way right either.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to give, just has to.
And that's where the pride and the ego and the greed come in.
Yeah.
That who's that going to be?
Mm-hmm.
Because Hamas pretty much says until the last Jew is dead, the world isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
And Netanyahu says until the last Hamas member is dead, the world isn't right.
And there are people who say, well, Israel, the Jews went in there and took over and are taking over land that doesn't even belong to them, and now they want everything, so they're not right either.
Well, that's the problem. Yeah, I mean that's much of the problem. I don't, and then you have Russia saying we're ready to go to war with nuclear weapons.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We're ready. I think they're just waiting for the U.S. to defend Taiwan or whatever excuse they can find to start something and say it's going to be. I don't know what the future is.
And God forbid that the election goes the wrong way. I mean, it's absolutely frightening to even think of it. Even think that what is wrong with people that they don't see what's right in front of them.
Yeah. It's a very scary world. We're trying to live what's left of our lives, and at risk of sounding morbid. We're not morbid people. But whatever time we have left at 84, you have to start thinking about that. Make the best of it we can for our lives and our family and our friends. That's what's got to be number one right now.
Changing tack slightly, what advice would you give to children or people who have gone through the experiences of childhood abuse in families? Is there any advice that you would give to in that direction?
We feel strongly that you can survive,
and thrive,
whatever happens to you.
Yeah. You can forgive. Mm-hmm. You can forgive. You may never forget,
but
and you don't have to forget. But you can forgive, and you can work on understanding as much as possible the other side, if you will, if you put it that way. But for whatever, we can say that time did horrendous things to people, and people did horrendous things in many ways, probably. Although we know that there are a lot of kids abused, and there's no war to blame on, or there's no the same thing, but basically something's going on with that other person. As a child, you can't figure that out at all. I'm working, I'm getting A's, I'm a good girl, or whatever. Why is this person beating on me? There's no, or whatever form.
And we were always the best kids. We didn't do anything wrong, obviously, out of fear, but we were afraid to do anything bad.
We didn't even know we were supposed to have fun as twins.
Being twins when we
People always say, "Did you ever do all these?"
No, we didn't.
But I don't know, when you're talking to a kid who's in the midst of that, it's pretty hard to say to them, try to understand, try to forgive. It's a, as we we know, it's a horrible place to be in, and I'm not sure you can process all that until you're older. Uh, that's all, there's no way, but I will say this, there's help available. It's hard to tell an abused kid that you can get help. It doesn't have to be that way. We were we were approached by neighbors who heard all the yelling and screaming and stuff and saying, I know something's going on there. Do you need help? I can help. Let's. We're saying no,
it'll
because
just get
it's going to
worse,
get worse.
And on the other hand, when we were around 15, we went to somebody for help. Do you remember? We went, I don't know where, if somebody
Maybe
helped.
through school.
Maybe, and we said, we're really having a hard time
Yeah.
at home.
Yeah.
This is going on and that's going on. And they said, we can help you. Just bring your parents in and
Yeah,
we'll get
right.
this all settled.
And
So-
that was never going to happen.
That was in 1955. Okay,
That was
so-
never going to happen.
No, so,
We
but
let
today
it
you can get help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to reach out to someone, but it's like domestic violence. It's very difficult to talk the one that having the problems to leave or to seek help. It's all too scary. I'm saying that I don't know if there's an answer. I don't know that there's any advice, but I think as the abused kids grow up, they don't have to do it too. I think the cycle needs to be broken. It's an old line, but it's really true that you don't have to turn around and do unto others what was
That's
done
right.
to you.
I mean, that's one thought I had in those hard years is, I know what not to do
Yeah.
if I ever have a family. I didn't even feel those things or
No.
want to, somehow we came out of this as caring, loving, affectionate people, and we're happy for that.
Are you born that way? Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we were positive as soon as the door closed behind us
Yeah.
at home. We became, we lit up.
We
were
became the
being-
people we were meant to be.
Yeah,
But we always had each other
That's
through
right.
these years and
Right.
through everything we went through. And we do believe that
that helped
that
us.
helped us.
So, obviously, you're twins, but you did have 20 years apart.
Yes.
Was there any kind of, I mean, maybe this is a cliched question to ask about twins, but kind of a connection that you had even when you weren't physically together?
We actually
were.
did. We
And
had a number.
many of them while we were apart. Today, we talk to each other 3, 4, 5 times a day. I don't know what we talk
I
about.
don't either. Oh, I forgot to tell
Yeah,
you.
or,
Oh, I forgot
to
to ask
remember
you.
that, or
Yeah.
what's happening
Or
next
we're
week.
together,
Or
you
we're
know.
together. We
And we
spend
travel together. We do so much
we
together.
play music together. We're together. But while we were, those 20 years, we had a lot of those, what's wrong in the middle of the night? Something's wrong, something's wrong. And there was.
And one day,
Yeah.
I literally passed out. And it turned out that Monica
Turned
had
out
an emergency operation.
Yeah, I had emergency surgery,
Mhm.
and just about the time I was put under, she passed out. And they couldn't figure out
There
why.
was nothing wrong with me. Everything was okay. I was taken to the hospital. But yeah, so it did happen a few times.
Yeah.
My last question. Do you have any message for future generations of people who will be watching this interview?
that we haven't
Said
said
already.
said already. I think it's an obligation for all of us to be aware and to care for each other. And the awareness part isn't so easy. The caring you can sometimes figure out. But I think too many people just dig a hole and live their life and are unaware of what's going on. I think we need to know what's going on as much as possible, and then do what we can at different stages of life. That's going to take different forms. But I think we're obligated to be there for each other. And that's all people. It just doesn't matter. We are all human beings.
Yeah, no matter who. And we really do need to remember the things of the past. We really do, and not let them be repeated as is almost happening now.
Well, it is all
Yeah.
over the world. It's not just one place
Yeah.
or to one people.
Yeah,
It's worse. It's worse in terms of who's good, who's bad,
Right,
who's right, who's wrong, who's these poles, these opposite poles that have sprung up in so many parts of the world, in Africa and Israel and here.
Yeah.
And the truth is
Haiti and
that most of us that we're born, it's an accident of birth where you are born.
That's right.
It's not a fault. It's not your fault where you were born and what kind of life is in front of you. We're really,
Or who your parents are.
yeah. So it doesn't help much, but I guess that's our thinking about that.
Try to be happy and live your life.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there was one more question that you wanted to talk about, and perhaps if I ask, is there any sort of significance or special significance about giving your testimony to us today, and in general talking about your experiences?
For many years, there was only interest in and identification of Holocaust survivors. Definition was you had to have been in a concentration camp or the bombings in Europe. And those were the Holocaust survivors. Or, Kristallnacht, you have to have experienced that. And it's only in recent years that even the German government and other people realized somehow, and I don't know the story behind it,
I wish we did.
that there were survivors who suffered because of the Nazis in other ways. They were on the run. They were hidden. They were interned like we were in Shanghai, in strange places, and other ways. And there was a recognition that these people were survivors too, because they wouldn't have been in those particular situations if it hadn't been for what happened.
That's right.
Because of Hitler, because of the Nazis.
And
So
we
have experienced this lack of interest in us directly a couple of times. I mean, we have a couple of stories.
Yes, we finally went to
Reunion.
the Shanghai reunion, they called it. And they had it every year in some place, some country, and we finally went to what was the last one.
Yeah.
In
Toronto,
Canada.
Canada. Yeah.
Okay. So we went up there. We were all excited. We thought maybe we'd meet somebody, that we might even recognize us if we didn't recognize them. And we soon found out that they had absolutely no interest in people who were not from Europe or had experienced the Holocaust in a concentration camp or, in some other way in Europe and all the bombings.
Nobody was interested in us. I mean, nobody except the daughter of this doctor
Who we met there.
Nobody came up to us. Nobody was interested in talking to
Nobody
us.
talked to us. People turned
because
their
we
backs
were
on
not
us.
there. We were born in Shanghai. It meant absolutely
Meant
nothing.
nothing. Tell about the
Yeah,
one
and
lady,
then there was an evening at the Wiesenthal Center, Shanghai Jews. I think we got 10 calls from people saying they're having you should go to that.
see
And
that,
so Gita and Roger, my husband and I, the three of us went. We were all excited. We were going to meet people, and they had a program that was terrible. They had the wife of a survivor. He was passed away. They had a Mediterranean Persian Jewish woman who she and her mother were in Shanghai. They were part of that wealthy, and they had a horrible experience in the war because they only had one bathroom and they were only allowed to take one servant
with them. I
and
mean, it
we're
was
saying, whose war was this?
far from
So far from where, and they had another person who was somehow distant. And everybody, there were murmurs in the audience. This was a terrible.
The audience was very disturbed about what they
So
were seeing.
one woman,
Just us.
one woman stood up and said, "What is this?
Yeah.
This is not what we were expecting. This is far removed from anything." So Gita and I went up to her after the program and said, "Thank you for saying that," because we were feeling exactly that. And so we got to talking, and it turned out she had come from Germany to Shanghai when she was 2 years old. And she said, "And when did you leave Germany?" We said, "Well, we were not in Germany. We were born in Shanghai." "Oh," she said, "oh, well then you didn't have the experience," and turned her back on us and walked away. So that's where things were and why we have not been involved in the community until more recently when I was asked to serve on the Holocaust Advisory Board of Jewish Family Services and to review claims conference applications for help. And you have to be a survivor to review those applications through at Jewish Family Services. And there are hundreds and hundreds of applicants every year with stories that just break your heart. But anyway, and someone there told me, you guys are now eligible for reparations. Really? We didn't know that at all. And so about 3 years ago, we went to Bet Tzedek, and sure enough, they said, "You're absolutely eligible from Shanghai. You're not only Holocaust survivors. You happen to survive in Shanghai, but you're also children of Holocaust survivors." And so it took about a year to get through the application. And so we are now in our second year of reparation. And we got a check also for being children.
You get a
one-time check for being children. And now we get a monthly.
Well, it comes quarterly.
Well, it comes quarterly, but it's a month, So wanted to explain
How does that feel to receive reparations? Does that feel like justice, or how would you describe it?
No, we're not.
Recognition?
We don't look at
recognition.
is exactly
that's
right.
A good, It's a recognition.
We don't feel anything really about it, but
it is a recognition that there were people who survived in
other
ways. And not the same as getting bombed every day or living through a concentration camp, but there's recognition that you had suffered in your life, and your life was taken up in a way that would never have happened if we had been born in a normal Germany, Europe. We'd be in a different life, but so I think the recognition is very, very important. And, then we could talk about, well, should that happen for other people? And that gets very complicated. It's because that comes up. How about African Americans? How about the families of what happened in October? How about people in Africa who are under dictatorships, and it gets complicated.
Mm-hmm.
It gets very complicated. I don't know that I can address it in a useful way. So, but it's out there. There's discussion.
Thank you. Tell us what we are looking at here.
This is our mother, Estera Mayor's birth certificate. She was born in
Częstochowa, Poland, in April of 1913.
And how did you come across this?
My son spent a year researching our background in Germany. His wife told me that she's so happy to have him back after the year was over because he was obsessed.
He was obsessed with
He
getting our
day
our
and
history.
night and getting us, 90 different documents of this one's birth and that one's birth, and our dad getting out of Buchenwald and that kind of thing. So that's how we got it. He got all that for us and did it a family tree.
Thank you. Please tell us about this document.
This is the release of our father from Buchenwald. He was, and this is 1938, he was one of those people that was picked up off the street and just disappeared one day, as many people were, and was thrown into Buchenwald, and he was there, we believe, 8 or 9 months.
Less than a year.
Less than a year, but he was there. And this is his release.
And how did you come across it?
Same way, came from Gita's son.
My son's research.
Yeah.
Thank you. Please tell us about this.
This is my birth certificate, which was given out by the public health department, where they spoke English and therefore misspelled my name, which is spelled with a K, Monika. And I don't have any other documents with it spelled this way, but this is the only one we have of our, and my sister has the same document, and we were born on December 9th, 1939.
Please tell us what this is.
This is the back of the birth certificate.
Thank you.
This is a very interesting document in that it is what passes as a passport out of Shanghai to the United States. It says that because of the present conditions at the end of the war, there was no longer a German government. So the bearer of this document owes her allegiance to a government that is now defunct. And that is how we became stateless people. We had no country. And so they could not issue a valid, what they called a valid passport, because there was no government who would be held accountable for it. But this is how we travel to the United States. We each have one of these.
And we were called displaced persons.
Or DPs,
Mm-hmm.
or stateless persons, stateless people.
Thank you. And please tell us about this.
This is the back of the what they call a passport for us traveling from Shanghai to the United States. And that was issued in March of 1948, and we arrived in April of 1948.
Thank you.
I'm still panning. Let's see.